Book Land. My name is George Serrano, aka The Don, and if you're listening to this, you could only be here for one reason, and that's a brand new episode of the Major Issues Podcast brought to you by ComicBook Clique. And as you know, I am never alone. Sir, please introduce yourself.
I'm the man who watches the Watcher, Gregory Thomas, aka GT Rebirth.
GT Rebirth is here in studio, and today is a solemn day. It's a day of remembrance. It's a day of mourning. We decided that today and this episode would be specifically dedicated to the industry juggernaut himself, the icon, the creator of many of our favorites over at Marvel Comics. This would be our Stan Lee tribute episode. Greg, last time you were here, we had our swords and shields in hand to talk about some DC stuff. And what's odd is, I hope I don't sound callous in saying this, but Stan was up in years, and we kind of all felt like this day was going to come. Mm-hmm. But we still, I was going to be surprised any day it happened. Like, any day that we were told that he was gone, because the man's always seemed 90 to me.
Yeah.
And he's always been so energetic and vibrant in his old age that I don't think I ever would have suspected him ever going. And with the last couple years that we've been hearing some kind of maybe nefarious things working around with his money and stuff, I know we in the chat used to sit there and talk about, I hope everything's okay. You know, he's not doing any more public appearances and stuff. But I guess give me a little bit of what was going on in your head when you heard the news this past Tuesday that Stan Lee had passed away.
It's definitely something that, even though, like you said, like a man that high up in an age, you sort of see it coming, but at the same time, it strikes you, it finally happened. Oh, damn, that's sad. At the same time, considering what you just mentioned, a story that could have been a lot more, tragic and nefarious, is just, a man who lived a full life went out peacefully, and, you couldn't really ask for anything more.
That's true. I was taken aback. I actually had taken the day off of work, so I was working on a lot of our social media stuff, and then this came out, and it blew social media up. They say a lot about, various people have had their various opinions about comic books, but one of the things that I've realized, especially when starting Comic Book Clique and Major Issues itself, is how much of it is the connective tissue to a society that doesn't necessarily feel connected a lot of the times. You don't realize how much this art form, in particular comic books, has reached people until you sit unless you've been in the human traffic of a Comic-Con, or you sit in you're forced to sit in the very front row at a Marvel movie because it's jam-packed.
Yes.
It's connected people for years, so to see the outpouring of affection and emotion and just great stories that people have told. I'm a Kevin Smith fan, and he had a whole podcast episode where he was just letting people recant Stan Lee stories. How do you feel about the outpouring of emotion and those affected? I feel like there was a lot of people affected that I didn't really necessarily think were going to be, which I guess maybe I was downplaying the effects of Marvel Comics and the immense impact that Stan Lee had, but I thought it was really cool to see some people come out of the woodwork.
I did too. I always did look at the comic book community as a smaller community in its own right, large but small.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people who, again, to use the term I kept using last time, a lot of people who have a peripheral knowledge of comic books because a lot of it is just iconography that is sort of bigger than the brand.
Yeah, it's our folklore. So it's our modern day
absolutely
folklores.
Even though you don't know you may not know anything about Norse mythology, but you've heard of Thor.
Right.
You know about the Norse god with the big hammer.
Yeah.
You know what the Captain America symbol looks like, or Superman or Batman, or everyone knows Spider-Man on some degree, especially when they've peddled out 8 TV shows.
Yes,
but
this is true. This is true. They keep that Spider-Man afloat.
Yes, they do. So I was still pretty surprised to see the amount of people on Twitter that put some stuff out. My favorite one was Webster's dictionary, not Webster's,
Merriam-Webster's, wasn't it?
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, you're right. It's both
Yeah.
Merriam-Webster who put out the definition to Excelsior
Yeah.
on their Twitter page. I was like, wow, that reached someplace I never expected it to go.
Yeah, that was pretty legit.
A lot of high-end celebrities talking about Stan Lee, people who never even worked on Marvel movies, but like there is something out there from that brand that touched them.
Yeah.
A lot of people who you wouldn't even consider part of the comic book community, but have gotten into these movies, or maybe they just really like Agents of Shield. Like there is a connection there.
There's so many people who have yeah, their bank accounts is because of Stan Lee.
Yeah.
The creations of Stan Lee, and I could see somebody not being true blue comic book fan prior,
Right.
getting a role, realizing how much deeper the role gets because of how much literature has actually been and ink has actually been spilled upon the character arcs and progression of some of these characters. And then they meet the man himself because the man comes on set because he's getting ready to do his cameo.
Yeah.
You know,
You could almost argue that this thing Stan Lee created saved Robert Downey Jr.'s career.
yeah, you know, and it became a desperate times calls for desperate measures situation at Marvel with the creation of the MCU in a way, because they had only what they had left over from their massive rights
rights
deals
sales?
that they did,
Yes.
with Spider-Man, which is crazy because a lot of the Stan, a lot of the characters that Stan helped create early on in Marvel's renaissance are the ones that got sold right away.
Yeah.
The Fantastic Four, the X-Men, and Spider-Man, amongst others. And so to desperate times calls for desperate
measures.
desperate actions. You go and you start getting what some would disparagingly call B-list characters from Marvel that didn't reach possibly the same heights as a Spider-Man or a Fantastic Four or an X-Men, and you create a Marvel Cinematic Universe. And in the same way, this desperation dates back all the way to the 60s, right? Because Stan is a man who is attributed amongst...
Stan is the man?
Yeah, well, he is the man. He's a man attributed to saving
Yes.
Marvel Comics.
And maybe even comic books, period.
Yeah, in general. He served in the military,
Mhm.
which is cool because, I'm a veteran, so I thought that was pretty cool. And his official title was a playwright. That was his official title in the U.S. military, was he was a playwright. And there's been so many other... There's only been a few who've done it, but his list is up there with people who created, like, some of the greatest literature and film scripts ever. So I guess, that makes...
Interesting.
That, like Dr. Seuss.
I keep imagining him putting together like those USO shows now.
I would love to see him and Dr. Seuss, like some kind of like MASH kind of show with just him and Dr. Seuss, and he's like, get those rhymes out of here. And he's like, well, I don't want any animals biting other people and getting powers, so you keep that on your side. But
If I could draw, I would totally do that.
when do you remember first hearing or seeing Stan Lee?
So my first introduction to Stan Lee, I want to say was when he did the walk-on for Spider-Man the Animated Series.
Okay.
And it was something I don't think I fully grabbed onto as a child yet.
But you remembered it.
I remember it.
It stood out.
Huh?
It stood out. Like,
Yeah.
in comparison to the rest of the show. It's like,
But in a sense also because, like, that's not only just an odd walk-on, but, like, oh, that's the guy whose name is on the opening credits every time the show comes on.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. It was like they wrote the guy who made the thing into the show. That's interesting. Only to find that would become a thing that would never go away.
yeah. I first saw Stan, or first heard Stan, on Spider-Man and the Amazing Friends.
Okay.
So it was Iceman, Firestar.
Ha!
You gotta differentiate these things.
Yes.
GT. It was Firestar, Iceman, and Spider-Man, and they were all just hanging out. I had an apartment in New York where those three, Three's Company-esque situation,
Right.
and they would hit like a button, and all their furniture would flip and become like high tech, like Bat Cave-esque material, which is weird because I didn't remember Spider-Man ever needing that.
No.
Iceman either. But they would get to cracking, and he would introduce all those episodes, and he would take us to break, and now next time,
Right.
and
See,
when we
I came
return.
after that period that everyone was just like this is Stan Lee here talking about the Amazing Spider-Man. Like
Yeah,
I completely missed that stuff.
yeah,
So like I had to catch him in these sort of how do you say random acts of writing. The first time I think I've actually had a idea of who he was the one cameo very few people get to talk about, which is non-comic book related, which is Mallrats.
this is true.
Him just having that once, like a few scenes in Mallrats where it's just like, you're Stan Lee. I was like, who's that? Oh, I get it now.
Yeah, and a lot of people credit Kevin Smith for introducing officially
Yeah.
Stan Lee to a group of people who necessarily didn't know what his contributions were.
Right.
So that just shows how
He
much.
would be the guy.
Yeah, right. That shows how grateful the comic book community is. That this works a lot in that favor. That's the reason why these cameos are so entertaining, is because we understand his how integral he is to the creation of these characters here. But what a lot of people remember from Stan is, like I said, that whole renaissance, that whole thing going on in the early '60s, where he's basically, that on his luck, working with the fledgling, timely now Marvel Comics, and he is facing a juggernaut because 20 years prior to this, you got Schuster and Siegel creating Superman. We tackled Bob Kane and Bill Finger creating Batman here on the show. And he has an uphill battle now because he now has to create the thing that beats these characters who've been around for 20 years.
Yeah.
Wonder Woman as well. Aquaman comes shortly after that. So the formation of what will be known as the Justice League is basically coming to be. I want to say it had to have happened right before one of Stan's bigger creations, but we'll talk about that in a
Where
second.
they fight a starfish.
Yes. Starro. Where's my Starro sleep mask? I think it's around here somewhere. But yeah, this I don't know if I could have tackled something like that. Come up with the next McDonald's, right? Like
It's difficult because now you okay, here's the first thing. I need to do my best to not be in any way derivative of the only examples I have of this brand.
right. And how do you do that? How do you? It's like how many people took away from Kurosawa as far as those movies are concerned, but those were the movies.
We still do scenes that harken back to Akira Kurosawa today.
Yeah, so it's like, well, if we had more, if we had more to work off of, we do more. But you're right. Like, how do you do the the Last Son of Krypton story is already told. The guy going for vengeance for his dead parents is already told. And these are characters that are lasting, time. These are not like movie or like movie characters who sometimes fall in and out of the
Relevance.
the zeitgeist and the relevance of the society and stuff. Superman was still making tons of money. Same thing with Batman. In the '60s, Batman was getting ready to have his first live action show, which is like, that's bananas.
The only one I know the only movie character I can say that has kept like such a resilience in that time is probably James Bond.
Yeah.
We're still making James Bond movies with several different actors.
Yeah, but when you think of things like that, you think of like we spoke on here last week about it. Things like Robin Hood, or Johnny Appleseed. Or,
Still trying to get Robin Hood to work.
Yes. Well, that's. I feel like the same issue with Superman. We keep thinking we have to change it for new audiences.
I've never seen the first two, so I can't.
Listen, my definitive Robin Hood is the one where he's a fox. So,
That's the only one I've ever seen.
So that's my.
We're on the same page on that one.
You never seen Robin Hood Men in Tights?
I've seen that, but
That's
like
pretty
I
funny.
know it's a parody, so like I don't put it up there with like Superman's two papas.
Right. Yeah, I don't think I can take a straight on somber version of Robin Hood, because all the ones I've seen and I like are a little bit jovial, a little bit more like, it's fun that we're stealing. Like,
The new one looks like he's having some fun.
Yeah.
Taron Egerton is just like, I'm shooting arrows and I'm stealing from people. This is great.
Don't you know I'm Electro? That's all I need in
Jesus,
that
that's
film,
mean.
but then I'll be good. But yeah, you got the uphill battle because these things have become brands and people have made a bunch of money off of them. There's legal disputes and all that kind of stuff. So Stan is now on, creating on behalf of Marvel, and we would be remiss to not include Jack Kirby, King Jack Kirby, on that list. And very, very talented artist, and who basically created a lot of these things right there alongside Stan.
Yeah.
And depending on who you ask, had sometimes more input on these characters' creations than Stan.
That is the Piper to his Hogan.
Yes. Yes. And so it's their synergy that makes things basically come afloat. But right from 1961, we get Marvel's answer to the Justice League, right? Stan's editors come to him and they're like, they're doing something over there where they're putting all their heroes together and they're making them some sort of team. We'd like that too. And from Stan's mouth, he says that he tried to differentiate that team by not making them just a team, but making them a family.
Yes.
And so we get Marvel's first family, the Fantastic Four. Which was admittedly a blind spot for me growing up. The Fantastic, I just didn't get them. I didn't understand them. But as I've grown older and I realized how much history comic books have in general, and how they inform literally the culture around us, Fantastic Four had a humongous impact.
Yes, it did. I was aware of the short-running cartoon show they did with Fantastic Four, which may have had one of the sillier theme songs for openings for a cartoon.
That Hulk one is kind of bad too.
I've never seen that.
Yeah, it's pretty funny.
But
they always felt like they had to have a jingle, and it's like, with these guys, it's superheroes. Like, why do we have like?
This one was just hilarious because it's like it's just singing everyone's powers, and it's like Fantastic Four.
Fire! He's a rock.
Yes,
that's it.
So I remember enjoying that show a bit, although like it wasn't the best maybe characterizations of them. Like it's just like the Thing is mean and big and really enjoys fighting people and has a temper.
Right.
You know, Johnny Storm's an idiot kid, and like Sue Storm's the lovely damsel of them, even though she's technically the most powerful of the four of them in a way.
I do actually like the eventual Sue Richards that we get, Sue Storm, where they
the
make
Sue
her
Storm
more
I read in
independently-
Hickman's Fantastic Four was just like, yo, Sue Storm is the baddest one in this group, and I am
do
scared
not play
of her.
That woman. She will pop. She will pop your brain.
Did you even look at Valeria funny? Nope.
No, she is a force to be reckoned with in the future. But yeah, I could say that. But I also feel like in those eras that was very tropey, right?
Yes,
you just put a
absolutely.
girl on the team, and she was the one that was.
You had to protect the woman.
Yes. But Fantastic Four sets a humongous precedent. One, for having these heroes' place of origin not be like Pleasantville or small town USA. It's New York City.
Yes.
And it's not. It's never. They never play around with the idea that this is taking place in an actual city, and so that's one of the big things is how New York becomes a backdrop for a lot of these creations that Stan Lee and Jack Kirby end up making, and guys like Steve Ditko, who was part of the Marvel bullpen, but Marvel starts to get off the ground not only with characters like Fantastic Four, and they're being rooted in New York City, but Fantastic Four also didn't have secret identities.
Right.
Everyone knew who they were. They were famous almost, and that fame is the salesmanship of Stan, right? Saying, "Oh, our guys are here, and people know about them, and they are famous. They are famous in our books, and therefore famous in reality. Because when you read them, you feel like you are learning something that everyone else already knew."
Right.
And so he's already started to create this sort of, no pun intended, cliquey nature of Marvel Comics. And that's basically, there's so much of what I was hearing about how he felt about Marvel Comics that speaks to what the feelings that we're trying to cultivate here as part of ComicBook Clique and Major Issues, but the idea that like we are all together because we care about this and we all take this seriously, and it's as seriously as we take it and we defend it, and it's a club that you don't got to be in, but if you're in, your family.
Right.
And it's cool to see how he was the founder, the founder of that sort of fandom early on. Becoming a character in his own right, creating Stan's soapbox, where he's actually able to sit there and talk directly to
the fan base,
to the fan base,
and in such an informal manner.
Yes.
You know, it wasn't like it wasn't, you wrote in a letter and then you're like, well, James, I'm glad you wrote into us and we understand your opinion. It's like, he's like, hey, buddy,
Yeah, yeah.
glad you wrote in for it. Let me tell you what I thought.
And Stan's sense of humor, in many ways, was silly.
Uh-huh.
He was self-depreciate himself constantly. Just self-depreciate himself. He was deprecate himself, and it allowed a level of vulnerability
Mm-hmm.
from somebody that didn't like P.T. Barnum. I don't know what P.T. Barnum did, right? Like he was in the back. He brought all the elephants out and the people who used to like swallow swords and fire and stuff.
Hugh Jackman told you.
Yeah, you understand?
Hugh
There's a
Jackman
whole
told
movie
you all
about it. There's a whole movie about it. Oh, there's a Stan Lee. That movie needed a Stan Lee cameo. But Stan gets in front of this brand,
Mm-hmm.
trumpets its success and where it's going to be, and allows himself to be an accessible member of the team, not
Yes.
just a member of the team that was just in the byline and stuff. And they say that he fought for a lot of those first artist credits. That in a lot of ways, those names weren't on the front covers of stuff, like
Right.
written by artists, pencils.
Mhm.
Now we're getting to the point that everything's on, right? They did
Yes,
like
writer,
5 names.
pencils, colorist, letterer.
And
I didn't know what a letterer was until a month ago.
and for good reason. Like these people should be
Accredited.
accredited and
Yes.
acknowledged for their ability to help this medium move forward. I guess.
And the medium has progressed in such a much more sophisticated way since Stan Lee's day. Like, if you look at an old Stan Lee written comic and look at a Spider-Man book today, it is so miles apart.
I have an interesting question. Do you think that is something that was a natural progression for the medium, or do you think that that's something that Stan spoke into existence?
The progression of the medium?
Yeah, because initially it was kind of seen as passe and childish. People to this day are still saying the comic books are only for children and shouldn't be an adult pastime. But screw those people. But anyway, do you think that because Stan was such a serious liaison for this medium, that it made other people have the confidence to take it seriously, or do you think that comic books would have always been taken seriously eventually?
I think the progression of the medium would have progressed on its own, if even for the fact that like technology would have forced it to progress.
Yeah.
Like, once we got better ways to print art, and once we had better ways to draw art, and then once the proliferation of digital art came into play, it was always going to progress on that level.
Yeah.
I think as more corporations came up, even if it wasn't Stan, it would have been somebody else.
Yeah.
You know, somebody would have decided, well, why don't we go in this direction? I think it helps that Stan was the first voice, and it helped a lot to increase his his legend, so to speak, because like that's who he is. He's the guy who pretty much changed comic books for, I guess you could say for the better.
Yeah.
For the betterment of comic books in branching out ways we can tell a story.
Yeah, and definitely showing that there's more than one story you could tell in the Cape. Like
Yeah.
we're not relegated to the same stories that we have been hearing.
We can write a teenager, and he doesn't have to be the sidekick.
Right.
You
And speaking of which, last week when we were talking about Man of Steel and stuff like that, we were talking about reinventing Batman.
Yes.
Batman gets reinvented in Dark Knight Returns, written by Frank Miller.
Right.
But a lot of people feel like that is informed by Frank Miller's work on Daredevil.
Right.
Daredevil being a creation of Stan Lee.
Yes.
You understand? So it's this idea that he's allowing some of the people, some of the most prolific artists and writers, to work on creations that didn't exist 20 years prior to them touching the stuff, and then allowing them to see it to their vision of it, not the editorial or company's vision of it.
Right.
Like, there was a reason why the Daredevil book felt different than the X-Men book, which felt
Right.
different than the Spider-Man book. They were different stories that they were telling, and although they existed in the same universe, Stan let talented people run off with those things. Your Chris
Chris
Claremont and stuff like that.
Your Chris Claremont's, your who wrote the Frank Miller with the Born Again storyline, and Bendis later on with Daredevil. Guys like Who wrote Doctor Strange?
Ditko. Ditko was
Yes.
on Strange. Yeah, because Ditko was also on Spider-Man. Uh, yeah, you have.
And Ditko's ability to explore like really trippy, crazy ideas with Doctor Strange and magic.
And Jack Kirby, man. Some of these drawings, like the Galactus stuff, always bugs me out. Like whenever they show his spaceship, it's just like tubes drawn in these intricate mazes.
Mhm.
And you see the same stuff when you look at the Fourth World artwork
Yes.
of Jack Kirby's Fourth World, which is where you get characters like Mr. Miracle and Darkseid and all those out of this world creations. And those were all just in Jack's head.
Yeah.
That's
I think Jack was a bit induced.
Yeah, he might have been. There's those funny cigars he was smoking. I think somebody needs to check one of those things. But the Fantastic Four, they also had a byline on top of the issue.
Did they?
I have to look it up, but it was like the greatest. It was, and no, for real,
The
it was
greatest.
like the greatest comic book of all time.
Oh.
On the top of all of them, and he made it a point to come up with these monikers, these like fantastic and amazing. And
Yeah.
candy.
The Amazing Spider-Man.
Yeah, I just tried to look up Fantastic Four and Fantastic Beast came up.
It's topical.
Yeah, I guess right.
Yeah.
Oh,
It was
yeah.
always the Amazing Spider-Man, the Mighty Thor,
Incredible Hulk.
the Incredible Hulk. Yeah, the story of a guy who doesn't really want to be this superhero character and a person people don't understand. I've never gotten into the Hulk, but I understand sort of the mythos about it.
Yeah,
You know, it's really just Bruce Banner who doesn't want to be this thing, and another side of him that like isn't really a bad person but is misunderstood and is quick to rage.
and it's I mean, the parable is right there, right?
Yeah.
Jekyll and Hyde.
Yes.
One of the oldest stories told, and how you modernize it. A lot is spoken about the creations of Stan Lee in these early '60s, with creations like the Fantastic Four and other creations that we'll name in a bit. A big distinction is that these were creations made after we dropped the atomic bomb.
Yes.
And so because of that, we were starting to deal with things like radiation and gamma waves
Yes.
and what is it? Unstable molecules. Unstable molecules. The most hand wavy thing.
Right.
They're just unstable.
Yeah, they're unstable.
What do you
It's
care?
science.
They're just
You
unstable.
want to understand it more than I do. Just accept that.
I have a comic here. So on the top of every Fantastic Four comic said the world's greatest comic magazine. And this is Stan Lee's baby. So of course you would. Why not? Why wouldn't
Yes.
you pageant, toot the horn of the Fantastic Four? I thought that was pretty cool there.
I appreciated it, even though like you could say it's gotten a bit more wonky and they've almost switched places at this point. I appreciate the concept of that. Like Marvel is supposed to be the world outside your window, but with superheroes. So like you got to tell very real world stories.
Right.
The X-Men is just a story of, I'm not outright bigotry, but just like a misunderstanding something different than you
Yeah.
and being afraid of it.
And the other side of that fence, how do people feel when people have made prejudices against them
Yes.
without knowing them as actual humans?
As
What's the
people.
day in the life of that every day?
Right.
Where you're afraid of going outside because people are jumping to conclusions about you because of what people have said.
And even with like, those are just the regular working ones with powers, but like the Morlocks that are forced to live underground because we mistreat them because they look funny.
Yeah.
Maybe they're really short or their faces are misshapen, or people that got sent to circuses to be the freak shows.
And
You know
considering
what I
that
mean?
there's a subset of mutant, it's like
Yeah.
they're already treating mutants like crap, but there's a
Right.
subset underneath that. And that's something you speak of. There's a lot of poverty in Marvel Comics.
Yeah.
There's a lot of the working man. There's a lot of, and New York has its own history with the homeless.
Yes.
So there's no ignoring that, and just the same way there's no way of ignoring the humongous melting pot that New York is.
Mhm.
And I feel like in leaning into race relations and stuff like that, or just treat how humanity should treat one another, like in parables like X-Men and stuff.
Yeah.
That you're rooting it even more in realism.
Yes.
Although you're talking about the fantastical, you're talking about civil rights. You know, you're talking about human rights. You're talking about how we should treat one another and how we discern how we should treat one another just because we look the same or look different, all this kind of stuff. Bigots and you know, the rich that went to prey on the poor were always the villains.
Right.
You know, they were always put in that villainous vein. Well, we were covering Lethal Protector, and there's an entire arc about a subterranean society that is ignored by the rest of society, but they live fine. And there's a lot of that. Like, what is your home?
Yeah.
Because Gotham is, you know, Batman's home, and Metropolis is Superman's home, but New York is all of our homes, and so you can't. Spider-Man can't say like New York is his, but he has a corner there. So does the Fantastic Four, and upstate the X-Men do. And so it was always about like, even though we're all in this same world, what is your world?
Yeah.
What is your perspective? What is your corner of this Marvel universe? But you were talking a little bit before about the idea of creating a character that was a teenager but not a sidekick.
Yes.
You want to expand on that a little bit?
Yes, that being our friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, who's just like, he's just this kid that has who has this whole new world thrust upon him through happenstance, you know, despite the fact that they want to tell you that there's a spider totem and he was a part of a grander scheme and whatnot.
And there's two spiders, Greg. There's two.
There was two of them, yeah.
There's
I know,
another
and
one.
I just want to keep making this thing bigger and grander and making it all more complex. But
And one of them is a pig. He's a spider pig. It's coming out next month.
I like the Spider-Verse to a degree. It can get a little wonky, but just like this 15-year-old child who grows up over time, but it's just like, it's just a kid trying to balance being a teenager getting through high school, but also stricken with this now cliche but massive responsibility to use what he has for you know, some sort of better purpose.
Yeah.
And yet at the same time, even as he grows up, it's just like, okay, now I have this thing that I do and I want to help people. I've also got to pay rent somehow.
Yeah.
So it's like,
And also
I'm
gotta-
sort of defrauding this newspaper by selling pictures of myself just so I can get by.
Yeah, and I also have to lie. I have to. And it's easy to lie when you're an alien, and it's easy to lie when you're a millionaire.
Right.
But when you're a 15-year-old kid still living with your aunt and uncle, how do you lie? How do you continue to sneak off? How do you,
Right.
you know, hide the bruises and the bandages and all that kind of
How
stuff?
do you continue to lie to this girl you supposedly love and want to spend the rest of your life with, but you have to go, you know, save the bank
Right.
from Dr. Octopus?
And, you know, there was the constant wooing of characters like Gwen Stacy and Mary Jane, whereas, like, besides that little hokey, like, I like Superman, but I don't like Clark. Like, they kind of just got to the point with that. Like, Lois
Yeah.
was Superman's, you know, love interest. Like,
Right.
That was it. Batman, I guess they thought he was too cool for that. But
I don't know if Batman's ever had... I feel like
not
Batman's
definitive
never
one.
had
Now he has. Now he has a cat. So.
Sure, but like compared to everyone else, there's never been that, you know, long-term love interest character for Batman.
Yeah,
It's always a bunch of will they, won't they's.
I can see that. I feel like with Spider-Man, like we were talking about before, adding that level of realism to him being young and stuff is also the idea that he was a nerd.
Mm-hmm.
So he was bullied, which often causes inaction. We spoke about that before, right? How fear causes inaction. And so, you know, I don't remember, but I don't think that young Peter Parker prior to the bite is all about, like, saving people.
No, not at all.
You know, you're more in that thing. You're more about not being noticed. You kind of just don't want to rock the boat. You don't want to, you know, get on anybody's radar. So you just go. You do your work. He was smart, very studious. So he would go and you know, write dissertations and all this other kind of, like, really, really smart kid.
Yes.
But for the most part, didn't want to rock the boat. Didn't want to, you know, shake the foundation of anything. Then he gets these powers, and even then, only uses them to help himself.
Mm-hmm.
The man tries to get a job, like, on TV, and he has, like, you know, he's getting fame and all that kind of stuff, and then we get
Starts
the
getting
real,
into pro wrestling matches just
yeah,
to, earn
we
some easy cash.
we get the real hammer of the story of Spider-Man when we realize that it doesn't matter if you have all these powers if you're not willing to use them for the right reasons. Because while he has these powers, as the story goes, his promoter is robbed by a gunman, and when instead of helping that gunman, he feels like it's not his issue, and
Or
then
instead of stopping that gunman.
yeah, stopping that gunman, and then that gunman goes and kills his
Uncle Ben.
Uncle Ben, which then gives him an actual reason to join the fight because, and while this is cliche, they do something similar in Luke Cage,
Yes.
right? Where he doesn't have a reason to fight until Pops, spoiler alert, gets killed.
Spoiler alert for a show that's 2 years old.
And canceled now. So
Yes.
yeah. And if you're listening to this show and you haven't seen Luke Cage, I don't know what's going on with you.
You missed the whole episode because of it.
Come on, it's so good. But I feel like somebody was writing that off as cliche,
To a degree, sure, but
and I get it, right? But to me, I feel like it's shorthand for something very, very important that needs to be said, which is this idea that you may not think that something affects you,
right.
but it goes further and bigger than you do, and while it may not affect you now, it will eventually will. And when it does, it might be too late for you to pick a side, or it
Right.
might be too late for you to be able to change things around you.
And sometimes the side is picked for you.
Right, because the thing that you chose to ignore knocks on your door, and at that point, what can you do?
So for Spider-Man, it to me it centers on this massive this massive cloud of his guilt that he constantly has to wrestle with. I can't do the things I want to do because if I ignore this, something bad could happen, and it will constantly remind me of that one thing that I feel guilty about for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
And it's something I will always have to weigh against the things I want, whether I want to go on a date with Mary Jane or spend time with my old aunt or, spend time with my best friend Harry, who I haven't seen in months because I'm so busy doing this.
Right.
Or somehow...
He has some goblin disease. Oh, no, that's something else.
or somehow, find the hours to work a job to pay my rent.
Yeah,
Because...
and my boss actively doesn't really like me, but he hates the guy that I'm taking pictures of.
Right.
At what level am I just gonna let this amount of slander take place while collecting a paycheck?
My vocation for making money is giving pictures to the guy who uses those photos to slander me constantly in the media.
Yeah.
Also, but you also have another character who has the weight of guilt on his shoulders in Daredevil.
Yeah.
Who is constantly balancing his Catholic ideals with spending his nights punching people in the face.
And his virtues are so strong that they inform his I guess you would call it day job or whatever,
right?
Where he's a full-time lawyer. You know, he cares enough about the justice system and stuff to be that. And I think that's such an interesting day job to give somebody. Again, it's so hand wavy where you be like, well, he's a fighter, so he's a fighter pilot. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Or he's he has a lot of tech, so he's a millionaire. And this guy was already a scientist, so he now makes scientific inventions. That's easy, but the idea that Daredevil would have to be a man who not only respects and understands the rule of law and the I guess you would say the progression of it, right?
Yes.
As it goes through its various stages,
the
system, but also realizes that it has cracks and has created a persona to get what falls through the cracks.
In an outlaw-esque manner.
Right. That's got to be such a
it's a point of contention. Like, how do you play this character of upholding the law whilst being an outlaw on the side?
Right. And so Daredevil created by Stan Lee and Bill Everett, and a handicapped superhero.
Another thing for
superhero.
Another thing to reach out to a completely different sect of fan bases to relate to.
Right. So this idea that while most would think that he is disabled in this thing, he's actually taken his disability and found ways to work around it and actually get hone his other senses, and it's almost superheroes under Marvel and under Stan Lee, under a lot of these creations, it's almost superheroes being able to be heroes despite what life has given them, despite the cards that they have been dealt. They choose to still become heroes, even though they might be slighted or be at a disadvantage.
What year was Daredevil made?
Daredevil is 1964.
Interesting. So I'm reminded also of an old work called The Blind Swordsman, which always reminds me a
yes.
lot of Daredevil, which is an old sort of how do you say, samurai martial arts.
Yeah, a lot of
sort
people use that. That's a source material for a lot of
for a lot of those works. Is he Blind Swordsman from
blind protagonists.
Yeah, yes, or any sort of like handy capable. You know, I can still do this thing despite this particular handicap I may have.
Yeah, because people assume that because you are disabled or you have a disability that you're completely disabled, and that you have not, you just completely lost a side of yourself, like your ability to hear, your ability to see. Not realizing that if you had lost this for quite some time, that you would have taken the time to adapt and actually, gotten better. Despite
1962 was Blind Swordsman.
see that just
Yes.
2 years prior. So before, even though the mutants look that way and they're uncontrollable and they people are not fans of them and they threaten their beliefs, they still choose to help people. Even though Spider-Man is 15 and can barely keep a job and is always broke, he still chooses to help people. And
Even with even now in like the Marvel Netflix universe and with the character in the books, you have like a Misty Knight who lost an arm and is still able to, with her bionicle replacement, still able to be very much maybe not so much the cop she used to be, but the investigator and hero of the people.
It still feels that passionately about everything. To bring it back to Spider-Man for a second, Spider-Man is considered Marvel's most profitable superhero. Yeah, it's baby. It's most profitable. That guy rakes in a lot of money. That Spider-Man, that Peter Parker.
We are 6 going on 7 films.
Yeah, and we just passed 800 comics of the Amazing Spider-Man.
Yes.
So it's running and it's rolling.
Despite with the several other other books they've made.
Spider spin-offs?
The Amazing Spider-Man, the Spectacular Spider-Man,
Renew Your Vows, yeah.
Spider-Man Renew Your Vows, Spider-Man, Peter Parker Loves Mary Jane.
It just speaks to the popularity of the character. And another thing that Stan did was, when we talk about the character of Spider-Man, very much so in that discussion is the character of Peter Parker, because Peter Parker is different than Spider-Man. And Peter Parker has his own interests and his own plans for life and his own goals that are different than Spider-Man's, but on occasion he tries to line them up
Right.
the same. Where I feel like Batman and Bruce Wayne are one and the same. Superman and
Clark Kent.
And Kal-El, right, are all one and the same. Spider-Man has to live a regular life while on the side helping people.
Right.
Because he cannot live off of just helping people. He needs personal, and he cannot live off of just anonymity. He's 15. He needs personal interactions, right? He needs to know people. He needs to have friends. He needs to have girlfriends. He needs to have family. And how do you do all that while juggling the responsibilities of being a superhero? And not only that, the really cool, thinly veiled idea that because he's named Spider-Man, everyone thinks that this boy is a man.
Right.
Because he's masked. So who would know? Like this identity thing, and how often do young readers, or me and myself, right? We all always think we're older than, right?
Yeah.
And we should be given more responsibility. And then when that responsibility gets put on the lap of Peter Parker, he almost doesn't know what to do with it until he just
almost
listens.
immediately squanders it.
Yeah, until
like attempts to give it up at several moments.
Right. That's something that happens in Spider-Man 50 with that Spider-Man No More comic. That comic arc that, they even played that up in Spider-Man 2.
Yes.
Where he throws away his costume.
That one cover is one of the most copied things I have ever seen.
Yeah.
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 I've seen versions of it with like CM Punk walking off and leaving the white baseball shirt in the trash can.
Yeah,
Captain America leaving his suit in the trash can, walking off. So many different. The LeBron James leaving his Cleveland jersey in that trash
right,
can.
right.
So many different mock-ups of that one shot.
I'd have to do some research. I'm a little bit of a newbie when it comes to this, but I think it's one of the first times a superhero is just all like, I don't want to do this anymore. Like this is what I'm doing is not making a dent, and it's actually having negative effects on my personal life, and I can't manage both, which again is very human. It's very it makes the character vulnerable. Oftentimes we feel like we're overwhelmed and we just need to start cutting things off. And Peter was often tormented by the idea that he was the only one who knew he was Spider-Man. You know, and when you're young like that, when you're dealing with actual real life problems, you want to be able to express those things with friends and family and stuff. And so it made Peter very vulnerable and very tortured, especially in a moment where he feels like he needs to throw out his whole second identity.
Yeah, it's incredibly it's an incredibly relatable thing, especially if you are like a teenager who thinks that nobody really understands you.
Yeah.
You know, like you're tormented by this fact that you can't express your grief over a particular thing you're keeping in, or you're tormented by the fact that like you feel like maybe you have this alternate lifestyle that you can't express fully because people will shun you for it.
Yeah.
And you
even though you don't want to hurt nobody, even though you don't want,
and you'd love to just kind of throw it all away and not have to worry about it, but you can't. It's yours.
And it's you. It's yours,
There's
and
no
it's you.
getting away from it. And that's one of those things that Stan Lee, I guess you could say, Stan and Ditko and all those guys introduced, was that DC was sort of giving you these like almost godly like characters who weren't bogged down by these life problems.
What was almost also very weird is that not only were they not bogged down by life problems, but the life problems of other people were almost made in light.
Yeah.
Like, look at all those Superman Jimmy Olsen things, right? Like, Jimmy Olsen was a joke.
Yeah.
And all Jimmy Olsen was a regular human who was friends with Superman and worked 9 to 5 at the Daily Planet.
Yeah.
But one minute he's marrying a chimp, and now he's a giant lizard. All because you're not fantastical, Jimmy. We got to make you fantastical.
Yeah.
Where in
we have to make your life interesting because
where Stan,
you humans are boring.
Stan and Jack Kirby came from this place of the unassuming could be the hero. That 15-year-old nerd could be the hero. That guy in the wheelchair you just see rolling down the street, he could be the hero. That nerdy scientist who seems meek and timid probably has a side of him that, you know, can really get out of control. And so he made the unassuming spectacular, amazing, incredible, fantastic. And I think that it sounds incredibly cheesy and cliche, but that makes us a better society.
Absolutely.
The idea that we could identify that there is no archetype for the hero and everybody else is just pushed to the side.
Yeah, like it's a very beautiful way to assume to present the idea that like no, everyone, no matter what, can contribute.
Yes.
To to the good of everything. Did Marvel have a wheelchair character?
Professor Xavier.
Oh yes, that's right.
Yeah, that's all the way in 1960.
I guess it's hard for me to think of Xavier as disabled when he's probably the most powerful character.
But that's a testament to the characterization, right?
True. Yes.
Because the man cannot walk upstairs, right? But
he'll find a way up those stairs.
Exactly, and I think that's so cool. Is that this idea that you don't?
Because when you said wheelchair, the first thing I thought of was Batgirl.
Yeah.
You know, as Oracle.
Right.
But
look at how much of a deal they made about that.
Yes.
You know? And then the second...
a thing that wasn't even supposed to be canonical.
And then the second that they could take it away, she's back on her 2 feet again. So whereas they're constantly re-injuring Professor X so that he can't walk, so they can have that disability, which I think is amazing. And, you know, we have... With the teams of both the X-Men and the Avengers, we also have the tale of no one man could do everything on his own. Which... there have been superhero teams before, Justice Society, Justice League.
Right.
But the idea that these are all people that... I feel like Justice Society and Justice League were written in a way that everybody was all kind of on the same page already. Like they were all, uh, like we're all gods here.
Yeah.
Let's just take out this star monster thing. Whereas Avengers, you have a like right there in the beginning, issue 1, with Iron Man, Ant-Man, Wasp, and Hulk. I feel like I'm missing somebody. Iron Man, Ant-Man, Wasp, Hulk, and Thor.
Yeah.
You have a sibling rivalry right there off the bat because Loki's the first villain.
Right.
It's not a nameless, faceless alien thing. It's a family member. It's somebody that the hero knows and doesn't necessarily want to kill. May want to stop, but doesn't want to kill. And so they're already creating complex ideas of moral and identity just in those books, like of the Avengers and like the X-Men, where we're given a villain in the X-Men that many people feel is not, if not the number 1 comic book villain of all time, is number 2,
Right.
which is Magneto. And the idea that he may not be 100% wrong in his views, and that his views are informed by actual human history.
Yes.
And human history and human atrocities that him himself has faced. And when somebody's done that, how do you talk them down from being militant?
Right.
When they actually have human experience on their side to say, no, people when faced with something different, act violently. How do you then still talk them down from that? And we were dealing with that with race relations. If you've had things happen to you solely because of your race, negative things happen to you solely because of your race, how do you not build an animosity towards towards people who try to harm you, the people who try to judge you? How do you not try to build your own brotherhood, right?
Yeah.
And try to fight back against these people? And what is the right thing to do? Because the X-Men, while doing what's right and defending Earth and humans, still constantly being hated and disparaged. And that idea that's not as cut and dry as, let's say, Baby from Space saves Earth. You don't know?
You watched X-Men the animated series as a child, I imagine.
Yes, I did.
As you grew older and as you probably had a deeper understanding of the Magneto character, did rewatching the show really super inform you of it much better?
I think that there's almost nothing as informative than the first scene in X-Men. That first X-Men scene where he's being pulled away from his parents in the Holocaust, like in Auschwitz.
The first scene of the movie.
Yeah. First scene of the movie X-Men, where he's getting pulled apart from his. We're shown a very human villain here, and he's going to.
It's someone that you know is the villain, but at this very moment, like, it is highly sympathetic and like, you feel bad for this person because terrible people are just tearing this child from his family.
And also the idea that this is not a situation where you're like, oh wow, if this happened, this would be terrible. It's this happened, and it happened to a lot of people. It just so happens to have happened to the villain of our story,
and one of the most powerful mutants in the world, sadly.
And so they create this weird dichotomy where I wouldn't call Charles the hero of the X-Men story. I think that's more on his men and women. But the idea that you would create a level of relationship between the hero and the villain where they can have peaceful conversations, where they could just debate on, the righteousness of what they're doing.
My favorite thing in the movies and in the comic books and in the cartoons, all of them, has been the idea that Xavier and Magneto are always civil.
Yeah.
And there is always this thing that ties them together, that, like, we will constantly bicker and fight against each other on different sides, but alone in this room, there is still something between us that, like, we still kind of love each other as the friends we are.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it just sucks that we're both really ideologically opposed on this big issue.
And the thing is, one thing that they're not opposed on is that they don't want mutants to be treated terribly.
Right.
Magnus, Magneto, he's able to identify with Charles because Charles is a mutant as well. And that's almost where the anger comes in, because like I said again, when you use the relation to the race and civil rights movements going on here in America, it's the idea that we're the same color. Why don't you see what they're doing to our people?
Hmm.
And then Charles would flip that around and like, I do see what they're doing to our people, and they're doing it to all of our people, you and me alike, and we can't go to their depths
Hmm.
because of it. And it's the idea of vengeance, and it's the idea of how do you educate the masses when they already feel like they understand and think they can write off
Yeah.
an entire race or mutants or any of these people. We deal with it later with the Inhumans. This idea like, oh, you're one of those freaks and stuff like that, and it's
Right.
like, well, again, the unassuming is going to be what helps us here in the world, because we need to stop discrediting actual human beings, regardless of where they come from, how they
Hmm.
look, whether they're differently abled, whether they're a different race. Every human has the ability to enact good and make this world a better place, and we need to stop assuming that they all look one way.
A big part of Sam's mission statement, pretty much in everything. It's a very We Are Marvel ethos.
Yeah, and when you consider this is a medium that, unlike movies and television, it's very personal. I
Hmm.
feel like um, you bring it home.
Yeah.
You cut off or on the lights depending on well, I now have a digital reader, so I cut off the lights,
Right.
put some music on. It's a very personal thing for me.
Hmm.
I pace the level of the story, right? The pages turn as quickly as I want them to turn. If I
Right.
want to sit and just look at a panel for a half an hour, that's what I'm going to do. It's a very personal experience, and you come up with your own ideas and your own opinions and your own problems sometimes, things that you straight up don't like,
Mhm.
but it's all very personal
Yes.
because it's all going on in your head. They are helping you with dialogue and images,
Mhm.
but you're connecting whatever's not written in there, you're connecting that all in your head.
And in your own way, even though there's just still pictures, like in your brain, these things are moving.
Exactly. With the help of brilliant artists and
Mhm.
brilliant writers, you're able to create these mind movies the same way like you would with Moby Dick or Tom Sawyer and stuff. But the reason why I keep bringing up the whole private nature of comic book reading is because Stan brought that out.
Yeah.
He's like, no, we all do it. Like, it's not something that you just do by yourself.
Mhm.
Yeah, you do it privately, but we do it privately collectively.
Right.
And we could all continue to do it privately, but every so often, come to my soapbox and talk to me about it.
Mhm.
I make these things. You don't have to. It don't have to be a thing where I'm a nameless, faceless creator. Let's talk about what you
Right.
read. Those things that are going through your head, those problems you have, or the things that you really like, or the ideas that sprung out. Let's talk about them, and that made things so much more accessible, and became the connective tissue that became, was it the marvelous Marvel Army,
Yeah.
make mine Marvel, like all that
Yes.
stuff there.
But see, I'll say to that, it opened the door to two of the biggest cultural bridges in comic books. One being Wizard magazine,
Oh, you're right.
because now they had an outlet. Like, I didn't even read Wizard magazine back in the day.
But
I
it's
had
there,
people that
yeah.
I knew people that did, and I'd seen it. I'd only thought like they talked about toys occasionally. I'd see Spawn on the cover,
Yeah.
but like Wizard magazine came out of it, and it became a big how do you say, marketing tool for the comic book industry, not only for the big two but for everyone else,
Right.
to not only market their books but to market their creators and market their whatever form of merchandising that they could help build their brands.
And get straight to the reader.
Right.
Get straight to the audience that would want this stuff.
It also took and for a lot of people this hurt and helped them. It took comic books out of your local shop, and like in my experience, when I first saw comic books, even though I wasn't reading them,
Mhm.
like your local bodega by the train station,
Oh, right. Yeah. Or the
where it's just
the
on
pharmacy.
where it's just on a spin dial
on the
for you
on
to
the
pick-
rack. Yeah, the pharmacy is just sitting on the rack. I remember that.
for you to just grab and throw a couple of quarters at on the desk for to get your books, to now people opening up a comic book shop, and like this is a comic shop culture I completely missed, where people not only went into a shop fully based on comic books and comic book culture, but people stayed in there
Yeah.
for hours and met other like-minded people. Like, yes, stranger, please talk to me about Spider-Man for the next 3 hours. Let
Right.
us exchange our stories and our experiences and whether or not, he should be with Gwen Stacy or Mary Jane.
Right. And and like, did you feel this same way? And the idea that this fandom isn't I want to say not unique, because I
Debate
feel like
with me
that's,
whether or not the Mobius Silver Surfer or the Kirby Silver Surfer is the real Silver Surfer and why the other one is.
let's talk about that a little
love
bit.
that
Let's talk about that a little
scene.
bit. Stan Lee creates. There were so many prolific characters to come through, not only Marvel, but because it was his baby, Fantastic Four.
Yes.
Between Fantastic Four and Spider-Man, so many of the characters that we know and are near and dear to our hearts came from those books.
Mm-hmm.
I think of characters like Black Panther.
Mm-hmm.
He popped up in Fantastic Four first.
Yes.
Galactus and Silver Surfer. And this idea that Stan wanted to create this otherworldly being that would be like this, again, complex and flawed, like, doesn't want to murder people but needs to murder people to eat.
Yes.
And to eat to live. So,
this is how I was made. I must eat planets.
this is what I do. Don't you eat chicken? Like,
Yeah.
do the chickens go, oh no, the heralding of the dawn is coming. He's coming to take us all. I had a 20-piece chicken nugget yesterday, so I got chicken on the brain.
Vegans are the heroes, apparently.
But it was supposedly Jack Kirby that created the Silver Surfer. Just somebody that he thought it would be a cool idea would go first. And
I'm this
see
massive
these
cosmic
planets.
villain. Why am I doing work? You do a thing for me.
Go find those. Well, it's Galactus is not going to go around grabbing the melons and seeing which
Sure.
melons are ripe, right?
Right.
That's not his job. He just wants to eat. So
Plus,
it's-
you'd see him coming.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, that's true. And you don't want Galactus grabbing your melons. That's,
No, you don't.
The guy's huge.
No, you don't.
So he creates this character called the Silver Surfer, and Stan just falls in love with it, and he creates. And I know this is a bad comparison, but I can only compare from what I know and what I've seen.
Mm-hmm.
A very complex, almost Dr. Manhattan-esque existential creature who is given the power cosmic, which is so powerful that it makes him almost alien from everybody else.
Yes.
And gives him a visage that looks different than everybody. The guy is basically naked and,
Yeah.
and silver. But with that, Stan creates, Silver Surfer Parable, a story that delves a lot into like Christianity, Christian themes, and Judaism themes,
Mhm.
some of the oldest religions ever, and how they inform his characters, and how somebody like Silver Surfer, whose planet was also, I believe, was going to be attacked by Galactus.
Yes.
Where he's like, no, I volunteer as tribute, and they do that whole whistle thing, and they put their fingers in the air, and them getting movies mixed up. But yes, Stan really gravitated to that. But you brought something up, Morbius from DC, a Metron from DC, right? Who sits in the Morbius chair.
I believe it was a manner of like, people who created a vote on Silver Surfer, or whether or not like
Yeah.
which one was the right one.
Right. But you have, once Kirby goes to DC, there's a lot of characters that start to be like, huh.
Yeah.
Huh. Like, wait.
I'm not. You're. I think you're more educated on that than I am. But yeah.
Yeah, Metron, if I'm not mistaken, my boy Metron. Well, have you seen Metron before?
That's the Mobius chair you talked about, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm familiar with it because of that Dark Side War mess.
Yeah, there was a lot going on there. Guess who created Metron?
Was it Jack Kirby?
It was Jack Kirby.
Ah.
And Jack Kirby, so Metron, he possesses the powers of a god, and he sits on a chair, and he rather be a passive observer.
Right.
Sound familiar?
Yes, it does.
Silver Surfer was very much passive. He did not want to do what he was doing, but he was working for Galactus, and so that gave him the proactivity that he needs. But there was also a lot of this whole you need to remove Morbius from his chair / you need to remove Metron from his chair. Ooh, sorry. slash you need to remove Silver Surfer from his board,
Right.
kind of stuff. But yeah, Stan really attached himself to that character, and Silver Surfer is one of the first characters to get a video game. He was like on the Atari or something.
I
like
did
that.
see that. Yeah.
And I was like, wait, what? Okay, like of all the properties, this is the one that you really wanted back, but Stan really believed in that property. Also, really, really, really believes in Spider-Man. Has refused to turn down a Spider-Man cameo. My man loves Spidey.
Even in a video game.
From some of those earlier creations.
Oh, I was to say, like, Stan. I found Stan's place with Silver Surfer interesting in the sense that, like, he saw a way to. How do you say? So, if you're familiar with Family Guy, I imagine you are.
Yes.
Seth MacFarlane says he gets to really speak through the character Brian,
Okay.
the dog. For Stan Lee, that was the Silver Surfer. He got to speak to his thoughts on the greater world in general through this character who was on the outside of it looking in.
Right.
And
That
it's
makes
just
sense.
like the Silver Surfer was that guy where it's just like, you guys have all these beautiful things, you know, you have a race of people that need water to survive, and your planet is 75% of it.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know what is it you guys are fighting over? These petty things like power and money and bigotry.
And you know that power cosmic is something that Stan literally had,
Yeah.
being the creator at Marvel Comics. So it's this idea that when you've become that level of either successful or prolific, and you do look back or down,
Mhm.
or at your creations, what would you say? What would you tell them? How would you, if you could change the world, how would you push it? Where would you push
Right.
it to? And so the Silver Surfer is that, like, I don't want to change the world, but these people should know that the world could be better.
Yes.
So then you're same Spider-Man situation, right? Like, I don't want to do this, but if I don't do this, then it won't happen. I have this great power. I have the responsibility to use this great power, because if I don't, then when it doesn't happen, I can't be upset. I can't
Right.
say, like, so Silver Surfer very much, and has fought Galactus on occasion because of how he feels about the individual life and all that there. I don't know if this is a coincidence, but the very first Comic-Con, you talk about things that entered the society and the zeitgeist. Very first Comic-Con takes place in New York, and in 1964, the same year that the Avengers came together and were created by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby.
Okay.
So, and it also in New York. You understand? Like, that's
Yeah.
very, like,
It is the epicenter of this whole thing.
this is where you drum up this excitement, this fandom. This is a club. You need to get in on it. Did you know about the no prize? The no prize, Stan Lee's no prize.
No.
So I was reading about this in one of the Fantastic Four books, because I had read the when Black Panther shows up.
Okay.
And so it's this idea that you could write Stan Lee, right, as you write the editor, letters to the editor or whatever,
Right.
and point out inaccuracies and problems in the comic.
Hmm.
When you did, Stan will send you a letter that has no prize in it, like an envelope that has absolutely no prize in it, and he called it Stan Lee's no prize. But because of its so unique and also authentic, like this is coming from the editor, people started to keep these things.
Oh
You
my
know,
god.
like this is, I got, like, they used to want one, like, hey, the Marvel No Prize. It's a fake award given out to Marvel
Oh my
readers.
god, that's incredible.
Yeah, and he would.
That is the showiest thing ever.
Yeah, they said that they started with.
I award you no points.
Yeah, because I think back in the day, people used to legit get like points or get stuff. If they
Right.
found a continuity error and stuff like that, they would receive like cash or free comics, like as a way to not deter them from reading it anymore.
Mm.
But Marvel was all like, "You're staying on this. What are you doing? Like, here's your prize. Here's your no prize." I'm gonna see if I can pull up.
Stan Lee would later write a whole book about Peter Parker's continuity errors.
Right. I'm gonna see if I can get a picture. If anyone has any of these Stan Lee, because I would something I would want.
Mm-hmm. Now, as I sit before you, you, sir, are wearing a T-shirt of the Invincible Iron Man.
This is true.
Have you heard?
Another flawed
Yes.
character, a character born
Highly flawed. Flawed to degrees that they try not to talk about too much anymore.
you know, this is a character born as an industrialist, and this is something that Stan wanted to tackle. Like, how can somebody who is from an industry that people may not see as building humanity still believe in humanity, still believe in the future, and still believe in the individual?
So it goes a little deeper than that.
Oh wow.
In the sense that, like, the timing was very particular and why he came up with it.
Okay.
This was coming out, I think, of the Vietnam War or maybe even the Cold War, and like the fact that we had a lot of these problems that were part of the war industry and the war economy.
Okay.
So while at this point, like, people were really down on people like that, like if you were someone who was like a weapons manufacturer or whatever.
So people were disgusted by the fact that war had become a business.
Yes,
Okay.
and anyone who profited off that sort of thing, and like
Because it
they
seems
won.
like an eventuality sometimes, war, or necessity, not necessity, but something that's futile. But when
Yes.
but when you're trumpeting, you know,
Yeah.
like, well, if you're gonna go to war with Stark, you know,
Yeah,
like then
yeah.
then you're almost seen as villainous, like you're preying on
Right.
humanity.
So like now it became a challenge. Can I create a character who very much profited off the war economy and was a big cog in that machine, a big cog in that machine as a weapons developer,
Right.
and make him likable and popular?
Right.
And you got Tony Stark.
Yeah. And you know, a character whose alcoholism has been documented both in film and in comics. Definitely flawed, and goes through his own, you know, trials and tribulations, but welcome member of the Avengers.
And now, like, because of the power of the movie industry, went from like an almost B-level, you know, Marvel character to like the centerpiece of an entire generation for people.
And now that we talk about it, that's exactly what we were talking about earlier, right? This idea
Yeah.
that the unassuming,
Mhm.
like, you think that Iron Man isn't gonna be cool, but you don't know Iron Man enough.
Right.
And that's Marvel's weird, cool, clicky. You understand? Like, you want to be in this club. Like,
Yeah.
you're not getting it. Yeah, our distinguished competition across the halls, DC is killing it with comics. You may think, but they are all basically the same thing.
Yeah.
You
Like
want
you think Captain America is just this flag-toting Boy Scout, but like this guy's got some issues.
Let's talk a little bit about that. Joe Simon and Jack Kirby create Captain America
Yes.
in the 1940s for Timely Comics. But Stan Lee
Punching
breaks him out of
Hitler.
ice.
Punching Hitler.
Punching Hitler. That's what.
If anyone ever wants to tell me that comic books never get political,
Oh, I hate that.
Captain
I
America punched Hitler.
I hate that. I hate that whole thing. Like, can they just be comics and not talk about social?
They were
social
never
issues?
just comics.
They were always talking about social things. You're just not paying attention. But
Magneto is the biggest social justice warrior in comic book history.
legitimately, Stan takes Cap off ice.
Yeah.
What a move! There are fewer character rebirths as epic as that. He could have left that Timely Comics character right there, you know,
could've.
right where you. And I think the last story of him, he just like disappeared. It was
And
like-
and to an interesting credit of it, like, not only do they get away with bringing back Captain America from, you know, from what, the 40s?
yeah,
Like, bringing back Captain America from the 40s and bringing him into the present day, whatever it is on the scaling timeline.
yeah.
Then years later, getting away with bringing back Bucky.
Yeah.
So
somebody that they
thunderous
said-
applause.
Yeah, somebody that they said, when you consider that the character in IP could have been dead, they've been not only able to resurrect him, but even the sidekick into his own whole story there too. And guess what? So it's very interesting that you put it that way. But you have Captain America, you take him off ice, and you bring him into the current era, which is the '60s, right? You got lots of civil rights stuff happening in the '60s. What do you do with a guy born in the 40s, where the 40s look very particular? People on TV and magazines and in movies looked very one way. How do you take that man born in that and modernize him up in the 60s, and how does he rub up against some of the social changes that have happened. And they went kind of shorthand, and they gave him Falcon.
Yeah.
And Falcon is not a sidekick, he's a partner.
Right.
Captain America sees the African American superhero Falcon as an equal.
Mm-hmm.
And that was all anyone needed. That was it. That was the shorthand.
Yeah.
There was never any like, wait a minute, Cap kind of should have been or whatever. No.
Like, this dude's fighting the same fight I am.
And
we're together.
And people would be bringing their own cynicism to characters like Cap.
Mm-hmm.
And saying things like that, like, oh yeah, well, he would have been racist in the 60s. You know, they're bringing their own cynicism to it, whereas Stan and Marvel always went high.
Yeah.
And said, you're not being idealistic enough.
Right.
That guy exists, the guy that can be, hand in hand with any race and believes that everyone is equal. And just because you haven't met him doesn't mean he doesn't exist. Mm-hmm. Where the majority of the world was speaking from a place of, well, I've seen. Well, Marvel's like, well, you haven't seen this.
Yeah.
And I thought that was pretty cool.
It's like everyone in the 40s was racist. It's like, not that guy.
I was talking to my roommate about this yesterday. Stan creates Black Panther.
Yeah.
And Black Panther, no offense to anyone, could have just been a spear-wielding guy from Africa.
Yeah.
You understand?
In jungle grass,
jungle. But this thing was called
and
Jungle
barefoot.
something. Was this thing called like Jungle Fevers? That was the comic
remember.
that he started off in.
I don't remember.
It was like called Jungle Adventures. Like it wasn't very, fancy. But
right.
You get this regal warrior king, T'Challa, comes from Wakanda. Wakanda is incredibly technologically advanced. So like even back then, even with small side characters from the Fantastic Four who have become billion-dollar IPs, it starts with Stan and Marvel and the bullpen saying, "Oh, this could be a hero too, and that guy could be a hero too, and that race could be a hero too."
I strongly believe that right now at this very point that even though we've got one more big character coming down the pike in Captain Marvel, like Black Panther could be the key to the future of that whole business.
Yeah.
Like of their movie industry where we have to like in the professional wrestling sense where they have to create new stars in order to keep running that whole system.
Yeah.
Like Black Panther right now is their key to their next era of that whole Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Right. And it's also this idea that while Black Panther did gain a lot of success in the movie industry, it never necessarily had like a stellar $1 million run.
No, not at all.
But the character was always kept afloat and interesting, which then raises your eyebrow and goes, how many other Marvel characters are out there that I have not given a chance to?
Right.
Which then allows them to open up the book and start introducing these characters little by little, saying, again, you think you know them, you don't. You need to be in Marvel to get them.
To an even lesser extent, like who heard of Killmonger before the film?
Right.
And now there's several people with Killmonger's right shirts.
Yeah, like they get the haircut, they cosplay as a guy, and he's become, he's added to the culture of our society.
Yeah.
And so have these movies.
If they haven't already, they're probably looking for a way, like, how do we write Killmonger back into the books? We need to put him back into the books.
I'm kind of sad to think that Stan wasn't able to see a good Fantastic Four movie before he passed.
Dude, I can understand that.
I think 2005 he was fine with, and that's as right, like cheesy.
I mean, the last one certainly made those movies a lot better.
yeah. Stan started the catchphrases: "True Believers,"
yes,
"Excelsior,"
yes,
"Enough Said." He, like you said, he sat there and we spoke about this. It's so funny because we spoke about this in the Superman episode that we just did, which is this idea that if you want to humanize somebody, they have to have the individual interaction.
Yes.
And Stan was all about that individual interaction, talking to the individual reader, to the individual person they're reading. Because again, with this being such a personal way to ingest this media,
right?
You can't just say readers. Because he could be talking to me, he couldn't be talking to me.
Right.
But now he's talking to the Marvel readers. Okay, so that's me.
Right. And then sometimes you get addressed very specifically.
Yeah. And this idea that Marvel readers are not bigots and Marvel readers are not racist.
Right.
And if you're going to read Marvel comics, you can't have those things. He's almost bringing a level of accountability to the fandom as well. which
So
is
like
something
if you
that
want
you
to
don't get
if
a
you
lot.
want to be a complete hater like some people are now and call it SJW Marvel, it's like they've always been that way, dog.
Yeah.
Um, an interesting thing for the way they write comic books, and now I'll come right back to Stan. Is that as I look at this lovely cup full of several
Ah,
Marvel characters.
the branding, bro.
Yes, branding is real. Where guys like, again, the real human factor that Stan would put into his books, guys like Superman. Superman didn't really have a contemporary. He made some friends, but like the friends he made were kind of made of Clark Kent.
Yeah.
Like Jimmy Olsen is called Superman's friend, but they don't have like a real rapport, and Superman's a busy person. You know, Clark Kent can't keep up a rapport with Jimmy Olsen because he's busy being Superman.
And Clark's never being threatened to be fired.
No.
Or being evicted.
Despite constantly disappearing.
Yeah, his car doesn't break down. Nothing happens to him in his regular life.
Right.
That's ever troublesome. It's the Superman stuff.
Batman doesn't really have friends. You can say that Dick Grayson is his friend, but really he's this kid he
kind of works
raised.
with him. Yeah, he kind of works with him. He's like a indentured servant. In a
Yeah,
way.
you know.
Yeah. Alfred, him and Alfred are kind of friends, right?
Kind of, but Alfred, but Bruce is the kid Alfred raised, so like it just got kind of just a tree.
Yeah.
Continue
Branching off.
Diana doesn't have too many contemporaries because she's completely disconnected from her Amazonian race.
Right.
So she's very much the outsider. Captain America, he's got like Bucky Barnes is his best friend who came back to life. He made a new best friend in the Falcon. He started dating.
He joined the Avengers, but they all became his friends.
They all became friends.
The Howling Commandos.
He has the Howling Commandos because they came back too.
Yeah, you know.
He starts dating the niece of his former love and Sharon Carter, which is still weird, by the way, but it's a thing that happened.
Yeah,
he has
Carters.
these contemporaries of his. Bruce Banner's got a few scientific contemporaries, at least especially in Tony Stark when he's not hulking out and going crazy.
Yeah.
Tony Stark's got Rhodey. He's got Pepper. He's got Happy Hogan when he was alive. A lot of these characters have these connections that are family for them in a sense.
Yeah, which is what I was saying before, like this idea that it's not about the world, it's about your world.
Mm-hmm.
What is your world? I get that we all live in New York, but Spider-Man's New York is different than Iron Man's New York.
Yes.
Their mornings tonight are completely different. The people that they interact with, the issues that they go
Spider-Man's
through.
New York is very different than Luke Cage's New York down
Yeah.
there in Harlem.
I kind of felt like the closest we got to maybe those being kind of similar was the Spider-Man Homecoming going to get a bacon, egg, and cheese. At the thing, I was like, oh, we just need him to stop by Pop.
New York breakfast all the time.
Yo, stop by Pop's Barbershop to get a fade for Homecoming, and we're good. we are straight, baby. We're good. But yeah, you know, these...
Luke Cage's New York is not Doctor Strange's New York up there
No.
by the Sanctum.
No, and they all hang out. Like, the elation of the idea when it's revealed that Cap and Daredevil hang out at the same gym.
Right.
Like
I didn't even know that,
That's
but
such
that's
a
interesting.
that's such a mundane detail. It's such a
Right.
like, but it's so cool. It's Fogwell's gym,
Right.
where they
I
constantly
didn't know
show,
he goes to Fogwell's. That's interesting.
Cap is boxing in Fogwell's in that Avengers thing where he's just destroying punching bags and he's
oh, that's Fog. Okay.
yeah. So it's always
I'm
been,
going to ignore the fact that it's filmed very differently on the TV show, but I get
definitely.
it. I respect it.
But I think it's so cool that, you know, like the whole Jerry Hogarth is this person's lawyer who then works for Heroes for Hire, and,
Right.
And I think that's cool.
What's her name? Claire.
Oh, the Night Nurse.
Yeah,
Right? Claire
Claire is
Temple?
basically like Netflix Nick Fury.
Right, and the idea that these people would need a person of that expertise to patch them back up. These are things that people weren't thinking about back then. Damage control.
Right.
Right? The idea that there would be a whole subset of the government that is, you know...
Tailored to like superhuman insurance.
Yes. Yeah, like all of that is... And Heroes for Hire, such a revolutionary thought. Like, oh, well, I'll do it, but you got to pay me.
Right.
That's something born from real life
Got rent.
issues. Yes, from real life issues. Captain America, because he's out of time, he don't really deal with rent and stuff like that. He's more in the Superman, like, I'm more of a concept than I am
Right.
a actual character. But everybody else has those problems. They're constantly being threatened to being fired. Even Tony is getting threatened to getting kicked off his own company every now and then because there's a line they have to tell.
The stock fell at Stark Industries, and he almost lost the company.
Yeah.
And at one point, I'm gonna rant a little bit here because I was
Go ahead.
happy with it. At one point, like Peter Parker had Parker Industries, and
I
it was
remember that.
bigger than Stark Industries.
Yeah.
And like that was kind of cool. And then they were just like, no, we've got to make Peter back to the way he was because characters don't get to grow.
I
And that's
absolutely loved this is my little side rant. I absolutely loved that one of the first things the evil, vindictive Dr. Otto Octavius does when he possesses Spider-Man's body is to go get him an additional degree. just cause he knows science so well, he's gonna stroll into a college, ace everything, and now you're Dr. Parker. Okay, you happy? And
Yeah, I'm Dr. Parker now. I'm going to completely start a new business and run it up to be bigger than Stark Industries.
That's it. I'm younger.
I'm going to
cooler.
fall in love with this nice little short woman.
Yeah, so Dum Duggan, Nick Fury.
I've got to get around to actually reading Superior Spider-Man.
Really, really good. I really, really dig it. And
Is he Superior Octopus now?
yes, he is. He also falls in love with a vertically challenged person.
Yes, I said. Yeah, like
Which is
falls in
also-
love
yeah,
with a
yeah,
nice
yeah,
little
yeah.
small woman.
Yeah, so it's with the Marvel inclusion. You
Yes.
know, again with this idea that
This normal sized person can like love, like they're just people.
and there's nothing, and there will be moments where somebody else will comment on it, and then Otto will flip out.
Like,
Are you kidding me? This is just a person to me, which is, man, like that's. I hate to sound like a broken record, but that's the world I want to envision.
right.
That I spoke about in the last episode. This idea that not everybody's going to. People are going to see people with disabilities and stuff, and they might have their own headcanon, or they might say things in their own head, but not everyone is going to be these vile creatures that are going to be like, look at that, and
Yeah.
you know, you're different, and all this other kind of stuff. I want to believe in the betterment of Marvel, and because Stan Lee created this universe, it could be that better. It could be better.
Yeah.
And everybody who was not thinking of all humans as the same were, again, shown in a villainous light.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Doom creates an entire country and like runs them well.
Yeah.
At one point, they take him out of his dictatorship, and everyone's like, "Why did you do that for?" And like we're all fed, we're
It's
all
like
clothed.
he's kind of a dick, but like he's good to those people.
Complexities, you know, it's not just mustache twirling. I mean, the guy's named Dr. Doom. It doesn't get more mustache twirling than that, right?
His name has Doom.
My name is Doom. I will find him. It gets crazy and it gets wonky, and a lot of stuff shouldn't stick, but because they tied it to the human nature, the very flawed human nature, I think it works.
The reason why one of my favorite unsung, how do you say, like arcs is the Loose Nuke arc for Captain America.
Okay.
Because like you take Nuke and like him and Cap are not that much different, except Nuke took to what happened after the war so much worse than he did.
Yes.
And like there's that cracked reflection, you know, like I could have been this guy.
And also there's also like this really thinly veiled cool kind of look on war itself, where in Captain America's age, war was deemed a little bit more
Acceptable?
not only acceptable but more heroic.
Sure.
Like you were making a sacrifice.
It was
When you-
easier. I hate to use that word in that sense because it's still war and it's still whatnot, but like what Cap had to do in World War II was easy because it was the Nazis and it was the
Black and white.
It
Black
was a
and white.
clear, easy to define villain. The Nazis were bad.
Right.
Cool. Go in there, get rid of them, get out.
But when you got stuff like Vietnam, a war that we had lost,
Yeah.
where
or
soldiers
places we
were
or places we probably just shouldn't have been in.
Vietnam, where soldiers are booed from when they return. You understand? Where
Yeah.
there's this anger towards people who thought that they were doing the same thing that the Greatest Generation did.
Right.
And so you have
People
Nuke,
who are inspired by that generation.
right. So Nuke is, you understand, the prototypical Captain America, you know, the successor almost.
Yeah.
But society turned on him. And what happens when you do that? What happens when the mission changes and what you view as enemy and friendly change, and how war changes you? And Captain America never once writes off Nuke as a complete monster that needs to be killed. He tries to work with him with baby hands, and it just so happens that Nuke just wants to machine gun everybody and everything at all the time.
See, that was the great thing too. Like he almost gets to him for
Yeah.
one moment.
Right.
Like, did you read it?
Yeah, with an army of nukes.
Not the army of nukes.
Okay.
Right before he loses the serum.
Oh no, I don't think I read that one.
Okay, I would implore you to read that arc. It's right before he loses the serum. There's basically, like, he just came back from Dimension Z.
Right.
So,
I
like,
remember that.
He's real upset about the fact that, like, this kid he raised in Dimension Z, like, is lost to him now.
Yeah.
Sharon ends up in Dimension Z, and, like, it's kind of lost to him, too, for a little bit. So, like, he's in a really distressed place, and then he finds out about Nuke. And, like, he has to go in and try to take this dude down, because Nuke is just being sent to other countries where Americans had fought in and, like, either lost or been driven out, and, like, it's like
He did an etch-a-sketch, everything like
not etch-a-sketch, but like he's there to win the battle.
The battle that was been over, that's
Yeah.
been gone.
Yeah.
But just to even the
Like,
score or whatever.
like he has this thing he keeps saying. He keeps saying our boys. Like, you know, they made our boys look bad.
They did that in Born Again, remember?
Yes.
Kingpin plays into that by saying,
Yes,
they did.
absolutely.
They did make our boys look bad. They
Yes.
hate it. You're supposed to be seen as a hero. That's why I loved it when they did it kind of sort of with Dex in Daredevil. They
That's
do the same
right.
thing. Like, you're a soldier. You're doing what you're being told. And people are...
And now they want to shame you for
yeah, they're
it.
going to shame you for making...
You saved me.
Right, and it's that same thing. And that's why it's not so black and white with some of these people. They're the disenfranchised.
Right. So, like, there's this one moment in it where, like, Cap, in his distress, is about to, like, kind of go too far and lose his stuff, and he's gonna really wreck him. And then he starts to talk to him because, like, Nuke reaches him on a level where he was just like, I just wanted to you know, how do you say, not get revenge, but, you know, get some closure for our boys because we got made to look bad, and, like, this hurts us.
Right.
And he's like, okay. For a moment there, Cap realizes he can reach this man soldier to soldier. You know what I
They
mean?
have that in common, yeah.
Yeah. And he tries to talk to him about it. He's just like, this isn't what our boys would want. You know, this isn't what we would want us to look like, to reach out to people and whatnot. And there's a moment where he gets Nuke to calm down, and he shakes his hand. And at that very moment, a freelance reporter that went there to cover Nuke doing the chaos takes a picture of Cap and Nuke shaking hands.
Yeah, huh.
And then Nuke freaks out. He's just like, this is a betrayal. You can't,
Right.
This came to trap me. And, like, starts messing himself up again.
Yeah.
And then that very picture gets used against Captain America because, like, shaking hands with Nuke, with the bad guy destroying all the stuff, is Captain America in league with this terrorist of whatnot.
And on the other side of that, some things that people feel now is the disingenuous nature of people helping vets. Are
Yeah.
you helping vets because you want to help vets, or are you doing that for that picture?
Right.
You understand? Like this organization or that organization, how much money is actually going
Right.
to the? Are you just, you know, like letting this guy tell his sob story and rubbing his back and taking the picture? Or
and
what?
they even hit a very much another interesting note where Falcon is there too, and he goes to chase down the woman who took the photo,
Yeah.
and like she challenges his whole ethos, where it's like, do you want to say you believe in free press and free media, or do you only believe in it when it works for you?
Right. Which is something big.
So even though he's supposed to secure the photo, he's just like,
and
lets her walk off.
And it's going to be reiterated probably a couple more times on this podcast before it's over, but it's the big overarching idea of great power, great responsibility. Understanding the power that you wield, not downplaying it. Free press is huge.
Yeah.
We're now in this ultra woke era of now being able to weed through news and be like, well, they're trying to push us this way, they're trying to push us that way. But there was a time where
Someone
the internet,
with an agenda.
yeah, the internet in many ways did what comic books did, right? Where it connected us all, and we could all be like, oh wait, you feel that way too?
Yeah.
And so before the internet was created, comics had to set the standard of like, if you write things, it behooves you to write things to better us.
Right.
Not make these, like, you see some of these propaganda World War II comics where they're fighting these like ghoulish looking Japanese people and crazy looking German caricatures. And while I get
Or even speaks to some of the World War II propaganda Disney work.
yeah, I've seen some of that too.
Yeah, it's wild.
And I get that was supposed to drum up nationalism and it's supposed to help us be better. But once that all is gone, right? Once the enemy, quote unquote, is not right there in our faces anymore, where do we go as a society? And Stan and Marvel was saying we go back to the individual. We go back to the ones and twos. We go back to the personal relationships that we have with people. We go back to helping people who cannot be helped and defending people who can't be defended. And not because one, because you have the responsibility to, but two, because it's just the right thing to do. Where the X-Men are seemingly helping people who curse them out as they're being helped.
Yeah.
And it's a thankless job and they look miserable, but we're told.
But because they have that dream of the future where, like, we can all just hash this mess out.
Right. If enough of the good of us stand in front of the rest of us and set the example, then we can reach a common ground.
Which
that's
is
idealistic, but I mean, I don't want to live in a world where that's just thrown out, right? Where that idea, no, we're not going to try that. Let's do more wars.
Which does speak to an interesting thing they do with the arcs of two of the biggest characters in the X-Men. I, as an X-Men the Animated Series fan, always loved Cyclops.
Okay. Gene!
Yeah. Gene!
Madam Web!
Shocker!
They do a lot of yelling on those shows.
They do,
man.
yeah. So, I think it helped me a lot as like a young kid with glasses. I just really related to Cyclops. So like my how do you say, my optical sort of defect helped me to think that, like, if I take off these glasses, I can shoot freaking energy beams.
Right. No, yeah.
And that, like, I connected to him on that level because we had something that we shared, and I could vicariously kind of live through that. Also, the red shades were kind of cool.
Yeah. And you could be more.
Right. I could absolutely be more. Like, this handicap is actually something special.
Right.
As time went on, two things happened to two very particular characters in the books where it seemed like Magneto got tired of the fighting and found what the fighting did to everything around him and people that he loved and decided to, like, take a different stand and, like, kind of became an X-Men and, like, became, quote-unquote...
he helped lead some of them.
Yeah, it's like, kind of led the team for a time and became a quote-unquote, you know, one of the good guys.
Right.
Or at least tried to help on that side. Whereas the same exact trauma drove Cyclops completely in the other direction.
Yeah.
Like, having lost his wife several times.
Yeah.
And, you know, learning about, like, his future son and all the bad things that have happened pushed Cyclops to, you know, how do you say, push children into war because they need to be ready for this.
Right. They're both sides of the same coin of doing the right. What is the right thing, and how do we do the right thing?
The trauma of this war softened Magneto, but at the same time completely radicalized Cyclops.
Right. Where and that's the idea. I do believe that both of these people exist in the world in so many different machinations. The guy who thought that he was going in with altruistic ideas and going in to help a situation, whether this is the jaded cop, whether it's the teacher who just stopped giving a damn after a while. When they first got here, they came here to change the game.
Yeah.
And then too much bullcrap, probably too much bureaucracy, too much mistreatment, too much stress.
Or just too many friends lost.
Or too many friends lost, and you start saying, screw it, screw them. I don't care. I need to make sure that I'm okay and that the people to the left and right of me okay. Everybody else can go to hell.
Yeah.
And vice versa. You could have started with that mantra of everybody to the right and left of me are the only ones I care about and everybody else can go to hell, and then soften up to, well, the world's to the right and left of me. Right. Everybody's to... Are you talking about the right and left of me in this house, on this block, in
And
this.
at this fight I started, got people to the right and left of me healed in the first place.
Exactly. So both ideas exist, and that's why I think it's very important to have both of them. Because if you only have the one, if you only ever have that, crime will eventually make everybody so jaded that they just start seeing human beings as like expendable. That's not that's not a great story to tell.
While it gets wonky, I think that the X-Men is probably one of the most important stories in the history of Marvel Comics or of
Yeah.
anything.
No, definitely, and it sucks so much that we haven't been able to see them used to their full potential.
Nah,
I hopefully soon
things have
with
gotten
this.
so wonky with those characters and with their continuities and their timelines and who's what.
Um, we were talking earlier about how personal this medium is, and you expressed how you felt about Cyclops. I knew about these characters mostly through their animated avatars
Same.
on Fox and stuff. Definitely Spider-Man the animated series fan. I was a Batman the animated series fan, and I was fans of them. I got them, and they were fine. But as I got older and as I got more cynical, and I joined the military and stuff, I found myself more intrigued by villains.
Right.
I get the Killing Joke, and I get Brian Azzarello's Joker, and I start hearing about this Winter Soldier guy who's just come back from the dead.
Right.
And all the biggest stories touted in comics are these dark epics of like complex men who make rash decisions, based on how they feel is right or wrong. And maybe you can argue that all comics are that, but I much thought I had way more in common with those stories than anything else. And then I read Civil War. And I read Civil War while I was actually at war. And I thought I knew everything it was about Captain America again, right? Like I said again, I thought I could write him off. This is a Civil War. There's a mutant registration, a superhero registration act. And obviously Captain America, being Captain America, is going to be on the side of the government. And then Tony Stark, because he's too cool, is going to be like, nah, I'm too cool for this.
Yeah.
And I'll just keep being too cool. Wait, Cap is not on the side of it because he doesn't feel like it's freedom?
Right.
So he is defending America, but not what American politics are doing.
Right.
And that blew the logic of all of these heroes wide open for me.
Right.
In a way that I hope that the conversations that we're having here blow it up for the people listening, because it changed everything that I thought about that character. He believes so much in what America can be that it doesn't really necessarily matter to him where America's at the moment. And if America's wrong, he will tell America that America is wrong because he believes that America can be better.
Right.
And
I think it behooves to impart that also, like, Iron Man doesn't side with the government because he completely thinks the government is right in this sense, but more so especially in the movie than maybe in the book, but kind of out of fear.
yeah.
Because it always seems that Iron Man is trying to expound the idea that, like, you don't understand. If we don't toe the line, something worse comes.
Yeah, and also the idea of the right thing, right? Like where, if I've been doing all this, and I've been doing all this for you, the world, and then you, the world, tell me that I'm not doing it the best way, how do
Don't
I do
I
it
have
better?
a responsibility
Yeah,
to sort of answer to that question?
Right. How do I do it better? How do I best serve you? How do I? And there you go again. Like Iron Man, is so cool that to him it's an open and shut case that they're going to do this.
Yeah.
That they're going to sign, because that's what you do. You do what you're told.
Right.
Which I thought would be the soldier, believing that. And so all of that. Then Marvel starts coming out with the Marvel Cinematic Universe, just branching out of these characters that Stan created, with the same delicate pieces of humanity sprinkled throughout, where they do make the wrong decision a lot of times, but the entire time they're hoping desperately that it's the right one. And that to me is more of the definition of hero than anything else, than being bitten or coming from another planet or having millions of dollars, which is not a power. It's the idea that no matter whether or not you are 100% doing well, you should be doing everything for the right reasons. But the idea that you don't necessarily have to have all of what it takes to get the job done to start the job of trying to make the world a better place. You don't have to have all the powers to be. Peter Parker was a pretty good guy before all this happened,
Right.
before the spider bite and all that stuff. And through even with the trauma that he experienced, Xavier still, tries to be patient and have his just this stoic like pacifism
Right.
in him. And I will always thank Stanley for his ability to see the best in people. Because even when he is, jovial and joking at a Comic-Con or whatever, he is doing it for everybody. Stan Lee, we will get into this in a bit, but Stan Lee is his best creation. A lot of people say that the character that he's created, this like how the Mr. McMahon character came about for Vince McMahon, that Stan Lee came about for Stanley Lieber, and that he created somebody that was accessible to us and to let us all know that not only what we were reading was cool, but that it had an effect.
Yeah.
And that it's more than just what you see on the screen. It's what you take away from it. And when you care about it that much, when you put that much love and attention to it, it's going to be successful. It's going to reach people, and it's going to change the world.
One of the biggest things I thought about when it happened, and then like as you saw the outpouring of like love and appreciation for the life this man had lived, was we don't have this ever at DC Comics, despite the fact that it's older and it was the first, and it has characters that are beloved to the to this very day.
Yeah.
And iconography that is worldwide and well known. There's that whole thing that the Superman crest is as well known, if not more, than the Christian cross.
Right.
But we don't have this. The characters are more ambassadors than any person that we can actually reach out and touch.
Yeah. And Marvel, in a lot of ways, at least since I've been reading, there's also that weird feeling of like, oh, you might like this character, but this writer may not be it for you.
Right.
Where DC's like, oh, Superman is Superman. He's
Yeah.
always Superman.
Right.
It doesn't matter who writes for him. He's gonna be Superman. Marvel's more like, well, get to know the creators, the art. And I'm not saying that, creators like that are known for that now, like the Jim Lees and stuff like that, Brian
Sure.
Bendis. Those are Marvel. Those are Marvel guys. Jim Lee.
Jim Lee a Marvel guy?
Yeah,
Okay.
X-Men issue 1.
Ah, yes, that's right.
Liefeld, Rob Liefeld, he's the different.
He's known now.
Todd McFarlane,
Yes. Todd McFarlane's Spider-Man.
These creations, and that's what they call it. They call it Todd McFarlane's Spider-Man, Alan Moore's Swamp Thing. Like when your
Right.
creator has become so prolific that they're able to put their own stamp on this, and I felt that was happening way more at Marvel than anywhere else, where the creators were becoming their own characters.
Right.
And then you'd have these.
There certainly wasn't like Jeff Johns' Superman.
Right. You hear
No.
Jeff Johns' Green Lantern, right? That's what they say.
Nowadays,
That's what
yes.
they'll say. They'll say Jeff
It's
Johns.
not on the book,
which
though.
is cool. But that's cool though, right? That he's gained his own identity through this character.
Yes.
Um.
And even though like Jeff Johns is the closest you can get to that, he's not like a dude who. He was a dude who came into the job and was very good at it and gained a level of notoriety, but he's not a DC, how do you say, the person who carpentered the
Right.
structure.
In many ways, he was probably the fan reading soapboxes, you understand?
Yes.
And realizing how important that
Right.
personal connection was to your audience,
Right.
and how important it was to have your name out there and for people to know, and not only know just for general knowledge, but know so they can follow.
Right.
Oh, I like this writer. I'm going to follow him to his next book, and I'm going to follow him here and there. Stan created identities for these people, and then also incredibly got meta. You want to talk about like Deadpool and stuff like that?
Yeah.
The writers in Marvel were doing that way before Deadpool even was created.
She-Hulk.
Yeah, you'd see these characters. You see like
She-Hulk literally walking over one panel line to get to the other one.
You understand? They would, then you know that they knew this, how comic books were viewed in society, and so they could often poke fun or do something tongue in cheek, but they'll be damned if anyone anyone talk down their medium because they were professionals that worked on it.
J. Michael Straczynski's Spider-Man, probably one of the most important Spider-Man runs in the history of that character and in comic books. So big and so important to Marvel and to the real-world aspect that it got one of the few things that in my teenage years actually got my attention with comic books. There were two things that I heard about. Civil War, because it got everywhere for me, right?
Uh-huh.
Because, like, there were people who posted the banners of which side of you on constantly.
Yeah.
And when I first heard that they actually wrote this one issue post 9/11 about the event,
Yeah.
which was the black issue for Spider-Man.
Mm-hmm.
Just nothing but black on the cover and the name, and, like, this event that goes down where heroes and villains come together to try to put the city back in pieces.
Mm-hmm.
Like, pick up the pieces of New York City and try to put it back together. You know, you've got Magneto lifting steel beams. There's Doctor Doom out there. Kingpin.
There's a scene of both of Doctor Doom and Magneto standing next to each other, like, in tears.
Yeah.
And it says, there's, like, a line of, like, even what you would think is the most evils of this world shed a tear for the actual evils of the world, or something like that.
Right.
And it's like, damn. You know, it's still creating that line.
Yeah.
That definitive line that people want to skew the ideas of bad and evil. Like, why? Why are people so hell-bent on saying that it's not as cut and dry? And I get that it may not be, but if you live life by it may not be, you're going to fall into the gray a lot more than ever into the light. And I feel like you might as well have a semi-code, right? Semi-Marvel code, and that's expressed through the characters that Stan created. They all had a moral ground. Even the Thing, who could flipped out and look at me, I'm a rock monster and no one's trying to fix me, so screw this, I'm just gonna smash through it. Like, he could just be this hulking monster, but they humanize him. He dates a blind woman.
Yeah.
Like, you know, it's like they go through great lengths to show.
Just proposed to her.
Yeah, they go through great lengths to show the humanization.
The Thing with
of
a
them.
yarmulke is the most adorable thing I've ever seen.
I just like him shaking his fist at the Yancey Street Gang always. You damn Yancey Street Gang. That was legit. Like, and they always do that. They always have these callbacks in their comics.
Yes.
And I love
it rewards you for sticking around and paying attention.
and building the neighborhood. You know who the butcher is, and who the barber is, and who the mailman for the Fantastic Four is. Willie Lumpkin, who Stan got to play in the Fantastic Four. I want to say the Silver Surfer film, but if not, the first one. No,
Right.
it is the first one.
The first one,
because
okay.
the Silver Surfer film, his cameo is that he's not on the list to go to the Fantastic
Oh, right. He
Four's
can't get into the wedding.
He's like, are you sure I'm Stan Lee?
Which they did in the book.
Very, very cool. Very, very cool.
To sort of knock this down, I'll just throw a random question out for you there.
Okay.
What are you reading these days?
Marvel?
Sure, anything.
But you know what I want to read? I want to read Tom King's Vision.
I've heard really good things about that.
I just finished his Mr. Miracle, so I kind of want to get into Tom King's Vision. But I also want to get into. We were having this conversation off air a little bit. I want to read Stan Lee's Justice League because I want to see what he thought was wrong with the immortal characters of the Justice League, or not necessarily wrong, but what he thought he could bring to it.
Okay.
And I already know that he brought in all the alliteration.
Right.
Everybody has double M's or double W's. It's like
It helped him remember.
Yeah, it's like Waylon Wayne or something like that. Black Batman, by the way.
Oh, did he?
Yeah,
Mm,
that's Dan.
that's interesting.
You know, I want to read that. I want to see where he is going with that. As far as contemporary Marvel goes, I've kind of fallen off the rails when it comes to issue by issue. But I was really liking Captain America's run. I'm hearing great things about Cosmic Ghost Rider.
Okay.
Also, Immortal Hulk. I've heard some really, really good things about. But I see that they're gearing up for the War of the Realms.
Yes.
And that seems to be like it's going to be
That's
lot.
gonna be this. That's gonna be a massive.
Sprawling epic.
Yeah, it is.
What are you into nowadays? What are you catching up on?
I'm reading a lot of that stuff. I'm really enjoying the Coates Captain America so far.
Okay.
They're shaping up for some interesting stuff going on, especially if you remember the Winter Soldier stuff. There's a lot of callbacks to that.
Okay.
I guess he was a big fan of that book.
I mean, it makes sense to go back to some of your most profitable runs, right?
Absolutely.
What people remember about those characters.
Absolutely.
I really, for the life of me, don't understand how they've managed to maintain Spider-Man for as long as they have. Honestly, I don't understand how they keep coming up with new things for the teenage boy. We're 40
Who's now
years.
a grown man now.
Yeah, we're legit 40 years in now, roughly. Yeah, and it's like we still got things for this kid, and I don't get how he does it. But he just passed issue 800 not too long ago, and now he has his own Spider-Geddon, the second big sprawling epic of his, which I also want to read. I did read Spider-Verse, and I read Spider Island, which has nothing to do with Spider-Verse, but I thought it had some kind of connection or something like that.
Okay. Yeah, I've been reading new Iron Man run so far.
Liking it?
Huh?
The Tony Stark Iron Man?
Yes.
You liking it?
Yeah, it's been pretty amusing so far. They've set him up with Janet Van Dyne. That's interesting.
Is Hank still Ultron?
He is still Pimtron, yes.
Okay.
He hasn't been seen since
Big Bad Harvey.
He hasn't been seen since Secret Empire, as far as I'm concerned.
Okay. When
But
he flipped out on everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah,
but he is
that.
still Pimtron. I think the only callback to Secret, well, I mean the Captain America run is definitely referring to Secret Empire like stuff. Like Coates isn't straying away from that.
Okay.
I think the Deadpool book did have Deadpool going after Evil Steve. Because he's real mad about what happened at the end of that.
I know one of the Deadpool stories right now, he's a secret agent.
Is he?
Yeah, secret agent Deadpool. And I also know that they're probably on issue 1 or 2 of Black Panther versus Deadpool.
Yes, they're on issue 1 of that.
Yeah.
I'm very much keeping up with Thor just because it's the epicenter of this big War of the Realms thing, as it has been.
Did you read Mighty Thor a lot?
Yes, when I first got into it, yes. It was weird because I had to catch up on it, and it's a long stretch.
Okay.
Because you have I think it's called I don't remember what the Thor. I think Thor: God of Thunder.
Okay.
Where you have Gore the God Butcher.
Right.
And then it runs right into Fear itself, where he loses or Original Sin, where he loses the hammer.
Yeah. And he says you have a brother or something like that. And,
No. Did you find out what he said?
I didn't find out what he said.
Oh. Do you want me to tell you what he said?
Yeah, sure.
He just says Gore was right.
Huh. And what did Gore say, that he didn't deserve the hammer?
That gods can't possibly be worthy because gods are selfish and spiteful and all that.
Huh.
And and him hearing that was almost something that Thor in his head couldn't deny, and that lack of confidence in it just kind of
made him drop the hammer.
Yeah.
Do you find yourself pining for the days of Jane Foster's story, or?
It was an enjoyable run. I thought it was a weird way they ended it off.
Yeah.
Where she doesn't we built up this Death of Thor thing and it didn't quite happen.
Okay.
So she still has the cancer, but she's alive. She's just dealing with it.
I don't want to get anybody mad, but I do feel like a lot of these newer characters are missing the flair that Stan brought to a lot of the characters that he started with.
Maybe.
Where there was intricacies, where I feel like nowadays with these new characters, they're trying to make them fit a template more than.
I think there was the intricacy of Jane Foster
having cancer.
Feeling compelled to do this thing that is steadily killing her because she can't go through the process of fighting the cancer.
Yeah.
While being Thor.
And it's also the idea I don't owe anybody anything. I'm not going to be here much longer. You know what I'm saying? Why should I even be doing any of this?
She could fight the cancer, but every time she sits in the Thor, it purges her.
Yeah.
And because the chemo is seen as, bad, that's all gone too. But the cancer can't go away.
Right.
Because cancer.
It's all sorts of weird comic book cancer fighting.
Yeah.
Wade and stuff.
On my way here, I finally started Secret Invasion.
Ah, that's going to be fun.
Yes.
I can't wait to tear into that because I think that's going to inform a lot of Captain Marvel. So I think that...
It is. I am not as hype for the implications of the Secret Invasion for the MCU because I don't think you get to recover from that in the movies like you do in the comic books or the TV shows.
Yeah. I mean, even in the comics, when you think of the ecosystem, there should be triple locks on everything now, right? There should be 5-point verification things for everything, because look at how quickly we were invaded. I don't know how that works for the MCU. The only thing I can think about the MCU is if you just say certain people, key people, are Skrulls, you get to hand wave that away if you don't want to hire those actors anymore. If you don't want
To a degree, but like to me, it's like I think of how much certain people, like even I'm not sure about you, but definitely Yogi and a few other people I know, like have that memory of Earth's Mightiest Heroes, where it turns out Captain America was a Skrull, and this dude's been using his face, and it becomes a big showdown between real Captain America and Skrull Cap.
yeah.
And it's like, you can't do that in the film because those films are a big part of the journey for him. And then if you tell us that this person we've been on this journey with has never really been that person, then those things didn't happen, and it is.
Or they probably shouldn't have happened because the real person wasn't in those situations.
Right.
It was an alien acting on autopilot.
Right.
And
we're like, First Avenger happened, but like Winter Soldier and Civil War wasn't the real person.
And even though it wasn't, he was still acting incredibly like how normal Captain America would have acted.
But at the end of the day, like it's like it didn't happen because it wasn't really him.
Yeah, I agree with that. I actually honestly agree with that. Which is why I think that we cannot have a Skrull be somebody who's had their own movies.
Right.
Which brings up the Rhodey situation, right?
Potentially, yes. Or even Sharon.
And then it goes back to my tinfoil hat theory of we can have it be somebody we follow in the movies as long as we only follow them for the one movie where they are a Skrull. And I think, just like Earth's Mightiest Heroes, the protagonist of the movie that we will be following is not who we're supposed to be following. Okay. I honestly believe that we will find out that main Captain Marvel is on some Kree ship being, I don't know, she was like upside down being electrocuted or something like that.
Sure.
And we'll have the one that we find.
The one that we end up following on Earth.
The one that never smiles, and the one that can never remember where she's from.
Punches an old woman.
The one that punches an old woman. She is she's an alien. That's my theory. Just because we have to impart how easily it is to be fooled by these people.
Right.
And how deep that they're in this covert ops thing. And there's no better way to show a disillusioned Skrull think that they're the real Captain Marvel, which happens in Secret Invasion. You'll get to it. But there is a Skrull that actually believes that they are the superhero that they're imparting on, and they're battling the memories in their head, going, I see, like, you know, I remember signing up for this.
I just got to the one where the Skrull that is playing Mockingbird actually does gives Hawkeye like a real memory that only they would know, and still finds out that she was a Skrull.
And there's like 5 points where everyone's like, she's a Skrull, and she's like, no, I'm not. Nope. I'm not, Clint. I'm not. I love you. And remember
I'm going to tell you this story about this baby we lost that only me and you would know.
Yeah.
And like, okay, Clint's convinced.
Son of a.
Clint's convinced, and then you find out she was a Skrull, and he was just like, we are killing all of them.
Exactly. And I don't think we get that personal betrayal. We can't get that personal betrayal with anyone in the phases.
No, because it wipes out
all the phases.
It wipes out an entire journey because it makes it all fake, and then it's just like, you can't look at them the same again.
Whereas if half a movie is fake, and the memories are real, right? Then those memories are still there. If we get the backstory from the Skrull, because the Skrull remembers what happened, then that's still information that we need, and then that could also be a reason why Miss Danvers would be like, screw Earth. Yeah, we're following around a fake version of me this entire time, and no one came looking until Nick got his eye chopped off or whatever, and they were like, this is kind of weird, maybe we should be looking into this.
Right.
And that's why I think every time you see her blasting or getting ready to blast somebody and you don't see who she's blasting, I think that's going to be Brie Larson 2.0.
Sure. Yeah, like those auxiliary characters that they bring in for everyone else's side stuff could be, like, Rhodey could be a Skrull.
What about Maria Hill?
Certainly.
Yeah.
Certainly could. A lot of those characters could play that part that don't really like. It would inform Maria Hill in a very interesting way when she comes back after the snap.
Yeah. Or
if she comes back.
What if like Luis is a Skrull? Luis, the Spanish guy from Ant-Man.
Oh Jesus.
Oh man, I didn't know it was an alien, man. That would be hilarious.
That'd be funny.
Let's talk about some cameos before we get out of here. ones that we remember, ones that we like. Our man Stan was always, a showman and a salesman. He actually wanted to be in movies.
Right.
Originally, he wanted to be a movie star, but when he couldn't be a movie star, he eventually settled for being a cameo artist. Somebody who found a way to almost every single Marvel film that has been created. He found his way in through animation. My favorite Stan Lee cameo, the one that caught me completely off guard, is the one that we saw earlier this year in Teen Titans Go to the Movies. You want to talk about bucket list
Oh, that is so meta.
things. The fact that he was able to sneak in on a DC animated film and get a cameo, I thought was absolutely amazing and definitely a bucket list item because it's like he's done all the Marvel cameos. That's never gonna stop. Oh, it's not never gonna stop. But that's never gonna go away.
Right.
And so the fact that he was able to impart on DC's universe, DC, artists and the company itself have gone on record of saying that regardless of where his contributions were made, he made contributions to the entire industry.
Yes.
And his waves are felt throughout the entire industry.
Right.
And I thought that was very respectful for DC Comics. But what cameos come to mind when you think of Stan Lee?
I think the ones that always stick out to me would probably be, first off, the most recent one where he makes a cameo in the Spider-Man video game that I did not even see coming.
Oh, yeah.
And it was kind of it felt very genuine.
Yeah.
Have you played it?
I've seen the scene.
Okay.
Because someone showed me a picture, and I'm like, is that the game? That's amazing.
He did look great, right?
Yeah, I was like, that is really, really good.
It's like this really, it feels really genuine when he's telling like Mary Jane that him and Peter were always his favorite.
Yeah.
So like that kind of spoke to me as especially in his older age, that he's reflecting on one of his favorite things that he got to write and create and be a big part of. Another one of my favorites was Stan Lee as like talking to the Watchers.
Yes.
Because it gave all of his cameos sort of its own like potential mythos.
Well, with the idea that everything's connected and the idea that, if all these universes are connected, then how is this same one man seemingly in the middle of everything? And people started to speculate that he might be Uatu. He might be one of the Watchers. And it was something that was kind of like thrown to the side.
So silly.
And then here comes Guardians, and he's sitting there talking to them.
He's talking to Uatu and the other one.
And he's talking about experiences that he's had. Like, I was a mailman, and I gave, Tony Stank and all this other kind of stuff. I thought that was really, really cool.
It was really meta, but at the same time, just kind of like it informs everything he's kind of done. To where like, it's not super cosmic or important, but now there's a little something to it than just this cheesecakey fan service of like we've got to stick Stan Lee in every scene.
And also to be incredibly meta, like Stan Lee has now seen his creations outlive him, or now actually literally outlive him, but outlive his influence, right? Like he's no longer doing the day-to-day character development for these people. He's become the Watcher. He's become somebody who cannot interfere. He stands back and lets McFarlane play with Spider-Man and lets who's the guy that was doing it? Nick Spencer,
Captain America.
No, who was the one who just did the whole long run of Spider-Man? Then he just got off at 800.
Dan Slott.
Who's
now doing Fantastic Four and Iron Man.
Right. He let Dan Slott play with this character. Everyone has their own envisions of this character, and he has to be the Watcher, watching in the background. And I think that's so cool. I love his cameos in Deadpool, where he is a strip club DJ. I never thought I'd see the day of that. And I like him more when you can't tell they're
and
gonna
then he
come.
also got to do like the cameo in a trailer.
Yes, and the cameo he did a cameo in Guardians in Thor, where he's gonna be the one to cut Thor's hair. He's like some kind of weird old
that was so
barber.
funky.
Yeah, Jack Kirby though. It's all Jack Kirby'd out. He had all those weird. So I really, really, really dug that. I thought that was pretty cool.
I think that I am very interested now. Like, I know there's a few more that they had already filmed. Mm-hmm. I am very interested to see where they do. I think they will keep the cameos up in their own way.
Yeah.
I don't think they'll, like, do anything
digitally
stupidly silly, where they like
resurrect Stan Lee.
CGI Stan Lee.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But like, I think there will be very strategically placed like photos of him,
Yeah.
or particularly used video clips or sound bites for whatever particular reason.
Yeah.
Like, I could totally see some kid playing with toys and he pulls a string on the back and it just goes Excelsior.
Yeah, I'm
And
very
like, that's it.
Yeah, I'm very interested in seeing. They have to keep it running. They have to keep it up. But I'm very interested in seeing how they do it, because it's gonna be a weird world without Stan Lee cameos.
I could totally see you could have Spider-Man like walking through school and there's just like a picture of the two founders of his school where it's like Superintendent Kirby and Superintendent Lee.
Oh, that'd be, yeah, I like that.
Like, there's just little things you can do to just keep them in the loop.
Yeah, because I think he was a police officer in like Jessica Jones or something like that. Like his pictures in the background as an officer.
Oh, do they?
Yeah, as an officer. Or
Ah,
whatever.
interesting.
Yeah, so it'd be very, very cool.
You've got to really look out for those Netflix things.
Yeah, he's like on the back of a bus, like a bus ad or something like that.
Ah,
They
okay.
do one for that. I think in Luke Cage where he's just walking. But yeah, really, really, really good. I guess I'll just end this solemn this episode by saying that,
More celebratory.
yeah, I started Comic Book Clique in 2016 because I started really truly believing in the message that comic books had, and just how their nature of bringing people together and making people think of the best versions of themselves. And I was really, really motivated by Stan's message and the characters in Marvel Comics. There's no coincidence that 2016 is also the first year I go to Comic-Con.
Right.
Because I have garnered the confidence given to me by these comic creators who told me that this is something that I could be proud of, something I could be proud to talk about, as we do here on the Major Issues podcast, where next week we'll be dealing with our annual, baby.
Yes, sir.
But the year that I create this haven for comic book fans, new and old alike, to sit and talk about these characters and these stories that have changed how people think, how people live. That same year is also the same year that I take a picture with Stan Lee.
Ah, yeah.
And so that's that picture there with me as Captain America. Stan has motivated many people to look for their own hidden abilities, their own hidden powers, to feel the burden of responsibility to answer the call, right?
Mm-hmm.
To answer the call of the hero. Don't ignore it. That call is for you because you have the power to answer it. Take your opportunities, take chances, make choices, and be better, because we all could be better. And that's also something I believe I have here tattooed: be greater. So be with a greater than sign, because I honestly believe that people can honestly be greater. And to know,
I thought that was the B team.
all right, and to hear these very words come out of Stan's mouth towards the end of his life about how we're all family,
Mm-hmm.
and we're all in the Marvel family. It's incredibly touching, and it will be his legacy that he leaves over, his ability to connect people from all kinds of backgrounds and all kinds of cultures and races, religions, genders, and are able to bring them all underneath the Marvel banner. We are the Marvel Army. We are, make mine Marvel. Create an identity, create a shared identity. And I want to personally thank Stan Lee for that. Thank you, Mr. Lee.
A lot of what I had already put on Twitter is this for me. Like, even though I only started reading comic books almost going on 3 years ago, Stan Lee and his messages and his lessons have been a part of my life since I was 5 years old, watching X-Men the animated series in 1992.
Yeah, you're right.
So it's like, even though it has mostly been from a distance, I have been inspired and influenced by the man, and he's been like a part of my home since I was a small child.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that my medium was much different than a lot of others.
He was a constant.
Yeah.
And goodness was a constant. And it was a constant that exists in his world, and he only wanted you to ever consider that it could exist in this world too.
It was X-Men treating me to treat all people with the same respect as human beings, whether or not they have differences than I do. It was It was Spider-Man teaching me about responsibility and respect for the little guy.
And that all the responsibility is important, not just your
Hmm.
superhero stuff, but your work stuff,
Yeah.
your school stuff. That you have to be a great nephew, and you have to be a good boyfriend, and you have to be a good
Yes.
friend. You have to try your best to be these good things, and ultimately, even when Spider-Man wants to quit, he's reached with the idea that this is you. This is always going to be you.
Yep.
When this dropped, we sat and we wondered how we were going to tackle it. I instantly wanted to do an episode on it, but then I started to feel like I would not have much to say that others didn't. But I guess that's not what it's about. It's more about us being able to eulogize Stan Lee in our own way
Hmm.
and show how he's changed our lives. Because again, our story is unique, but we are unique as a collective,
Yeah.
which is weird to say how something is unique and also all inclusive. I want to thank you for being able to rope me back into doing the Stan Lee episode, because this is going to serve very much like our Avengers episode where it was therapy, and people can hear that just like us, just like GT Rebirth and the Dawn, we are also humans who are using our powers to the best of their abilities and trying
Yes.
our very best to bring you guys all in, remind you guys that you are all worthy, that you're all part of the clique. And we have great men like Stan who were trumpeting those ideas and morals way before us to thank for that. But next week is the annuals, the year anniversary episode for Major Issues Podcast. So you have great power with those cell phones in your hands, and you have to use great responsibility to listen to our other 50 episodes after you listen to this. It's a lot, but I think you can do it.
You've all got long car drives in public transit.
That's it. You know what also helps, GT? The fact that the Major Issues Podcast is available wherever podcasts are found. That's
Everywhere.
That's Stitcher, Podcast Addict, Podbean, YouTube, Spotify, Google Play. If you have an iPhone, you have a pre-installed app
Yes.
called the Podcast app that you probably didn't know was pre-installed, and that's what you kind of get. And so
Apple just likes to sneak stuff into your
that's it.
into your
They
system.
did that with a YouTube album, remember?
Yes, they did.
They just gave everybody a YouTube album when they. But
Thanks.
can they just drop? Can you drop comics, please, into Can you drop comics into my phone? Like, I
yeah.
never
Yeah, that'd be
accidentally
nice.
got a feature film.
You can
into
buy
my phone.
comics on Google Play, but it's just like,
And after you do, don't make sure you look for the Major Issues Podcast. If you have an iPhone and you have the podcast app, all you have to do is in the podcast app search Major Issues, and you see us pop right up in white, black, and yellow. If you have a regular phone, the easiest way, go to Google, type in Major Issues Podcast, and we're the first ones to pop right up. And I'm proud of that. I'm proud that we are Googleable.
yes,
I don't know. I'm
you
not
can
sure. If that's-
Google it.
You can go ahead, Google it. We exist on the Google. But Major Issues
We'll
is
put
brought.
that on a shirt. You can Google it.
There you go. Major Issues is brought to you by ComicBook Clique. And so that's where you can really reach all of us here at the Major Issues Podcast under our parent company, Comic Book Clique, by going to Instagram at Comic Book Clique, Facebook.com/Comic Book Clique, or use the hashtag Comic Book Clique to talk about the newest, hottest, latest, and greatest things to come to comic books and comic book media. That's TV, comic book, graphic novels, movies. We talk about it all here. We also have a Twitter at Major Issues CBC. Greg, you want to go ahead and give them your Twitter?
My Twitter handle is RebirthGT. You can speak to me anytime, and anything you have to say, I will do my best to answer it in the most snarky way I possibly can.
We are revamping our social media to give some facts and figures, some of this month in comic book history, go into some deep dives into some of these villains that you are seeing being portrayed for the very first time on TV and movies. We're having a lot of fun, and we're getting way more fan engagement than we ever have, and it's thanks to you guys. Our numbers are growing, and I've been to the future, and I see that we have become the latest and greatest thing to come to comic books and comic book media, but it takes your guys' help. A very last thing you can do, our birthday's coming up, our annual's coming up. If you can rate and review us on iTunes, that's the quickest way for us to grow as podcasters and grow our audience, to know the do's and don'ts of what you guys like and what you guys don't, and how to best communicate our message and our these episodes to you guys. Let us know how we're doing, and we can improve and be better and reach the epitome that we think we can with this podcast. Yeah, I'm at a loss for words. My name is George Serrano, aka the Don,
I am Gregory Thomas, aka GT Rebirth.
and we want to thank you, Stan the man, for everything that you have done, for everything that you have taught us, for the lessons learned and the friends made along the way, and for the general idea that it doesn't matter whether or not you are a 15-year-old bitten by a radioactive spider, or somebody hit with some massive waves of gamma radiation, or somebody born with the X gene, which brought you some kind of fantastical, magical powers. It didn't matter whether or not you thought, whether or not you were a god of thunder.
Mm.
It didn't matter whether you had the proportional strength of an ant.
Yes.
It didn't matter if you were incredible, fantastic,
Amazing.
superior, uncanny. I think I got another one in there somewhere.
For the most part, I think you did.
Amazing. Did I say, you said
Invincible?
spectacular? Invincible. Incredible.
Mm-mm-mm.
It doesn't matter from what corner of life that you are. We, at least today, are the Clique. We, at least today, are Marvel. And you, yes, you, are worthy. Excelsior.
Enough said.